Hello, it is live. Believe it or not, we are live with the naughtiest man on the internet, Mr. Joseph Jordan, who everyone's favorite man of Mediterranean extraction, who is here to enlighten us on events surrounding the conflict in the Middle East. And most importantly, I wanted to extract from him information or predictions that he might have as to how it may unfold in the near future and the further future, which, I mean, if anybody to ask, it would be him, if you ask me. And not only to do this, but to do it in a objective and YouTube friendly fashion. So here we are. Here we are, kiddies.
Right. So this is Joe Pesci on the public channel. So yes, all you melon farmers, and no, we'll keep it pretty good here. So yeah, it's good to be here. What should I call you, by
Thanks
the
for
way?
coming. Thanks for coming. Oh, call me Brendan, Aureus, whatever you want to. Yeah.
Yes, those are your pronouns. Okay.
Well, Aureus is the channel. Brendan is my name.
Perfect. Okay. So, no, it's good to be here. I've you and I have been friends for many years, or I know you. I really like your book on art. I was asking you about it today. We were talking about Art Deco a bit. So,
yeah, you were one of the first people to give me an interview when I first came out with the book. This was 2018 or something, I think.
Really?
You were one of the first. Yeah, one of the first. Yeah. One of the first.
Wow.
And you had, yeah. It was I was very grateful. It was immediately helped me out quite a bit, actually.
I also enjoy your Telegram channel.
Which one?
Hey, it's art, all right? It's art. It's got art in the name. Come on.
That's right. It's funny how I've wound my way into being a pornographer on the side. Yes, but we won't talk about that.
I mean, to be honest, though, you have a good taste in women. I have the same taste in women that you do. And so it's very cool how you find all these pictures of like women from the 70s and stuff. Like, I don't even know how you do it, but yes, it's a great public service. I appreciate it.
At a certain level, you'd like to complain and berate me, and at the other, it's irresistible.
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, there certainly is there's a based element to it, right? Because it's hearkening from a better time, let's say. So.
Oh yeah, fashion from the 70s. Yeah, it got a little weird sometimes, but I think women looked really good back then. Like really
very
good
natural.
taste. Indeed. So let's
Well, how do we approach this? How do we start now in this YouTube friendly fashion? I don't know. Maybe you have a way as YouTube friendly as we can. I mean, obviously it's going to be scandalous. No one should get particularly upset. This man knows a lot. He has his opinion, and he knows. You may feel he's biased. You may disagree, but I mean, come on. He definitely has a lot of information.
I welcome disagreement. So here's my perspective.
Right.
We can all have different opinions on things. However, this is in the context of the Israel-Palestine war, where disagreement is securitized. It's presented as a threat, as terrorism, to disagree with the United States government support of Israel. And whenever people do that, whenever they securitize a disagreement, when they start talking about it being a threat, being a terrorist adjacent threat, that's because they don't have an argument and they want to viciously suppress it. And so this is what I'm first and foremost going to say, because, I'm not, let's just say, I'm not a leftist. I'm a nationalist who is against Zionism. So it's distinct. However, what's going on college campuses in the United States, where they are targeting left-wing anti-war protesters, is a travesty. They have New York City NYPD counterterrorism police attacking students who are merely camping out peacefully, like, Occupy Wall Street or something like that. They're not violent, and their rights are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed because the system's out of arguments regarding what, our tax dollars here in the United States are funding abroad, which is the worst atrocity of the 21st century.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yes, without a doubt. And Occupy Wall Street, they didn't care for, and they shut down pretty neatly as well.
I think is worse because they didn't use SWAT, anti-terrorism SWAT teams to storm the school or mass arrests of 200 students at Yale. And I think what's really remarkable about this is that this is a point I've made in other instances. These are the sons and daughters of tomorrow's, these are tomorrow's elites.
Yes.
Their parents, these are, I saw one, his parents are advertising executives, so this is the system cracking down on its own janissaries. These are the people that are going to, exactly.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, these are the people that are supposed to fill the NGO, media, government finance pipeline, that sort of matrix.
Yeah.
These are people being trained for it. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the American regime is going to square this circle of putting its own janissaries in jail.
Yes. So that's why you, of all people, you've been made many accurate predictions before. That's why, particularly involving the war that's blossoming, and as well as what's going to happen in America, like you would really have some insights that I hope predictions, I'm sure you do, as to how it might play out, because that's what I'm most curious about. Like what I obsessively think about myself, and if one gets a moment alone with Joseph Jordan to pick his brain, as though you're sitting with him in the pub, as we are now, this is the information I would squeeze out of you. This is what's great about doing these little streams. It's like I could spend my Saturday at the pub talking to some guy, but
that's awesome.
It's not Joseph Jordan on the, like, this is what's great about the internet. You can talk to some absolute lunatic, some genius lunatic like yourself, and get amazing information.
That is awesome. I envy you. I envy you.
No, yes. I'm saying it's not as good. I could go to the pub, but it's nothing like talking to you. Like, I'm not going to find a Joseph Jordan at the pub or an Arval from.
I don't know.
Well, not with your wealth of information. You've done so much research, and you have so much actual information. You can pull up. This is your great skill. In fact, you can pull upon a fact with a name and a date in a way that I can't. That's for sure.
I appreciate
that you've read and absorbed, and like repeat it in a while you're talking. So that's great.
So too. You want some predictions, huh? Okay.
Well, as first of all, what do you think about the actual war, like the way it's set up, and what they've done so far? Let's start there.
Well, I think overall the war is going very poorly for Israel. I think that they're failing on two fronts. So they're failing to defeat Hamas in the sense of the military sense, right? Think about the strategic difference between what the Palestinians are doing now versus what they used to do with Arafat, where there's one point where they were doing suicide bombings on buses, right? Not a great look, not a great tactic. They were desperate. But this time, Hamas sent special forces to do assaults, use drone warfare. Most of their men came back, and they came back with like 250 hostages.
Right.
So then you have the problem that they're underground in these elaborate, they call it the Gaza Metro, which is like a whole city under the ground.
Right.
And my understanding is that they haven't made much progress in that regard because tunnel warfare is extremely difficult, even for the Israelis, who are perhaps the most trained in tunnel warfare. And yet,
are they?
Yeah, they have specialized units, and of course, the American Navy SEALs are training them, and so on too. But I get the sense, they're getting pressured in northern Israel from Hezbollah, which is arguably, if you take away the air supremacy of Israel, arguably a military peer. I've seen reports where the kill to death ratio between Hezbollah and the IDF in the north is roughly 1-to-1. Hezbollah has effectively pushed something like 60 or 70,000 Jewish residents in northern Israel out of northern Israel. They're now in Haifa, basically turned into refugees. So they turned Palestinians into refugees, and now they're the refugees. I mean, that's a total, just a symbolic defeat of the Zionist project. And so when it comes to how the war is going, you have military difficulties. Even they'll admit it. I've seen Israeli officials admit that they're having very, very bad difficulties militarily. You see a lot of videos of Hamas or Hezbollah killing Israeli soldiers, but very little on Telegram or Twitter of the reverse. The Israelis post pictures of themselves bombing schools, children's hospitals, sniping a mother with her baby. You see them doing that, but not much when it comes to killing Hamas militants or Hezbollah soldiers. Right. So militarily, it's going terrible. But then politically, internationally, diplomatically, Israel's list of international enemies, even if just moral, is growing. Like they are a pariah at this point. And by extension, the United States is a pariah because
just of their neighbors. So how is it set up currently as to who's on what side, and like what's the status of a place like Turkey right now and Egypt? You would know because I don't really know. Maybe you don't.
Well, I would say that Turkey, the government there, Erdogan, is very much like a Trump-like figure in that he says one thing in public and does the opposite in private. And so, Erdogan is very, the party that Erdogan is in, his political party, is in the Muslim Brotherhood. Theoretically, they're in an alliance with Hamas. But because of the fact that Turkey is in NATO and has all these secret agreements with the United States, it came out a few months ago that Turkey was one of the main routes of resource and all kinds of aid to Israel went through Turkey. Turkey was aiding Israel throughout the conflict. And the not the Ayatollah, but some foreign minister from Iran actually confronted Erdogan to his face with this and embarrassed him in the eyes of the Arab street, as they call it, which, of course, 99% of is extremely anti-Israel and doesn't want to see their governments supporting what's going on in any way.
So inside he's on their side and remains so. Would you say?
I think that he's just in a strategic situation where he just has to, he doesn't want to necessarily cross the United States completely, burn all bridges with America.
Right.
And the apple of America's eye is Israel. In fact, you could go out and burn an American flag all you want. It's only when you burn the flag with the Star of David on it that the people in Washington get offended. Okay?
Right.
Remember, there's an envoy for combating anti-Semitism. That's an official position in our government. There's no envoy for combating anti-Americanism. You can be as anti-American as you want.
That's like here in Ireland. It's I'm sure you know this as well. It's illegal to criticize the Holocaust, but not the famine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is pretty crazy.
I didn't know they passed a law like that. It's illegal.
Well, as far as I heard, I mean, I heard that at one point. I should verify that, I guess, but I'm pretty sure it would be a serious trouble. Obviously, I mean, anywhere in the West, really, to do that would be.
Oof. Well, good thing I believe that all 6 million, they were gassed and killed in ovens, and their bones were crunched up with special bone crunching machines and masturbation.
Let's take it easy on that talk. So
I'm glad.
Turkey's up in the air. So you wouldn't know like where or how that would like how crucial would Turkey be to the whole situation in terms of an actual war? Should it escalate into like first of all, do you think the war there will just simply escalate? Probably, I would guess the answer is yes.
Well, I don't think Turkey is much of a player in
Okay.
this conflict. Will it escalate? That's hard to say. One thing I'm going to say, though, is notice how Israel has been telegraphing that they're going to go into Rafah. So, for people that don't know, all the Palestinian civilians were driven out of their homes in Gaza to Rafah. And what is commonly believed is Israel is planning to expel the Palestinians in Rafah. So they're going to have to send the troops in to basically do what almost everyone, including Israelis, will admit will be probably the most brutal, horrific act of mass murder humanly possible. And they're going to push these people. The plan is to push them into Egypt, then to push them into Europe, just in case you don't know.
Oh, America, I heard. Did I see they're going to send $1 million to America or something like that as well?
I've seen some discussions. There's a fake port that the U.S. is building nearby, near Cyprus, that I've seen rumors from Arab media that this is actually intended to transport Palestinians pushed out of Rafah to possibly to Europe from there.
So don't you think that's maybe a step, even that alone is a step too far for Europe with the current sentiment? Like, how would you gauge people who see it our way, let's say, percentage wise, say across Europe and other countries? Like, it's not, I don't think it's a 50-50 split. It's certainly very unpopular at this point. If they did something like that, said on top of this genocide, we're going to send you 100 of the people we booted out of their country, or it's 100, 1 million. Wouldn't that be a step too far, even for the EU and the nations? Don't you think?
Well, let's just look at the basics here.
Okay.
Ursula von der Leyen, the German government, the French governments, all these governments, they tell us that these people are too dangerous. They're terrorists. They're too dangerous to live in their own homes. And Israel is defending itself by taking them away, pushing them out of their own homes. So they're too dangerous for their own home. However, how are they going to argue that they're not dangerous at all for our home, for the West?
I don't know.
So this is going to be the big, because you see, in Europe, in Germany, it's illegal to protest even for fundamental, basic Palestinian rights. If you go out with a free Palestine sign, you are arrested on the spot and jailed in Germany.
In Germany, yeah, that's different. Like here, it's kind of the other way around, obviously, for other reasons. Ireland is historically pro-Palestinian place. All you have to do is go to the north and look at a mural in a Catholic neighborhood. It'll be like Palestinian flag. It has been so for many decades. And so they're not going to, for that reason, it's kind of the opposite. So like if they tried to do that here, I could see it being very touchy. Maybe in Germany they could get away with it, I guess. But
I don't think that they're going to want to send Palestinians to Ireland, to be honest, because I think it's just going to be like adding fuel to the fire or something. I don't know.
Well, actually, maybe it'd be opposite. Maybe the Irish would welcome them with compassionate open arms at the same time. It might be another. Actually, I just thought of that as well.
I don't think they're just going to send 1 million Palestinians to one place. They're going to try to split them up. And the problem is, though, again, I'm not going to say this is a prediction because I don't know if that's even going to happen.
Right.
Because the reason why Israel hasn't gone into Rafah yet is that it's going to be extremely hard for them to beat Hamas militarily there. Unlike in the rest of Gaza, the underground tunnels, I read the other day, Israel has no intelligence at all on the tunnels under Rafah. They don't have any diagrams or blueprints or even any sort of idea, informants or nothing on what's down there.
Really?
So Yes.
So there really is like an underground complex, like a city under there that nobody knows. This is very mysterious and esoteric, and this is really quite excellent information, really, on a bizarre level.
Oh, yeah. And
they're
the
little burrows,
military,
even more so than the Viet Cong, in that they're like literally like rabbits in a burrow or an ant-hive under the ground.
This is not the Viet Cong tunnels. These are like, I mean, some people think Iran built them. Like, these are engineered, like, concrete. Like, the bunker buster doesn't do anything to them. Like, it's the bunker buster bombs. They don't do anything.
Right.
So Israel's going in blind into these tunnels, not knowing anything about them. The leadership, the military leadership of Israel says that they're preparing to take massive casualties. Like, the Israeli military will take massive casualties. And that's what a lot of these protests are about. Some of it is about the hostages. They're not getting the hostages back. But a lot of these other protests inside of Israel is that the people there are really scared of what's going to happen if they go into Rafah, because they could very well be defeated militarily there, like physically, militarily defeated.
So what would happen then, do you think?
Well, that's what's freaking them out. Because if Israel is militarily defeated, well, what does happen next? I don't know.
They wait for, I mean, then there wouldn't be an end to the attacks or anything. That's when it gets more serious, really, because that's when we talk, right? That's when we're looking. What do you think about the Samson option business? Is that something they would really do? Is that a real thing? And is that something?
Would Israel launch a nuclear weapon at Western Europe? Maybe. I mean, if they have even the most remote reason, they would. I'm not saying they have any moral qualms.
Well, simply because they're losing and that they didn't feel they got enough help. Wasn't that a stated reason? Am I wrong?
Yeah, I saw a recent war game where this was presented, where Israel is losing a war with Iran, like an actual kinetic full-on war, and the United States doesn't support them in using a first strike nuclear option, but they do it anyway because they feel their backs against the wall. I've seen all that, but I don't see a scenario where the United States doesn't go down with Israel.
And who do they even nuke if they're coming out of tunnels underground?
Right.
Who do they even nuke? They're like
themselves.
popping out of the ground.
It's like the size. What do they say? It's like, the tri-state area. That's the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, like the size of Israel. If you drop a nuke in Rafah, you're gonna get, let's just say, some blowback, to say the least. So it's a complicated situation. Like, I think that the Palestinians have them checkmated. They're making them look awful. They've ripped off the mask off of this. We discussed this on my podcast War Strike with Warren Balog, the history of human rights law, how human rights law was created after World War II by Zionists, by Zionists of Jewish ancestry, who on the one hand drafted the UN Convention on Human Rights, but on the other hand left a lot of loopholes for the sole purpose of establishing the state of Israel. So you'll see things in human rights law and in international law that makes no sense. Like, for example, any group of armed men can show up on a piece of land, and international law says that they're allowed to create a new nation under those circumstances, even if there's people living there. So you can see how that would work.
It seems like America and Israel don't, any of those laws they've drafted don't apply to them, and everybody knows that at a certain level as well. But yeah, they certainly have used that, for sure, has been their great trick for scuppering other nations anyways. But everyone knows, I think, it doesn't apply to them.
Well, that's the main complaint that I think is the real reason why Israel is being defeated across several theaters, militarily, politically, diplomatically, and frankly, Usually when you hear hysteria about rising anti-Semitism, it's usually, got ulterior motives, like they want to pass new hate speech laws or something. But to be quite honest, right now, they're not lying when they say a lot of people are becoming more, let's just say, skeptical of these people.
Most people that I know, just random people, like liberal people, would be. I mean, this is Ireland, so it's different, maybe. But even though I do know Germans and people, generally the tide, it seems to be against them, like in a way that it wasn't before. So
I always compare it to, for liberals in particular, right now, liberals, because some of us already knew a thing or two about this, but liberals, for them, it's like something like finding out that the local priest has a bunch of human heads in a freezer in his basement. Or it's that jarring to them. It's a complete breaking of all their cognitive dissonance, where now I'm seeing that woman Anna Kasparian at the Young Turks. You see Kim Iverson. They're going out there on YouTube and they're saying, listen, stop blaming Christian evangelicals for Israel. We know who the billionaires are who are buying off both parties. We know who they are and why they're doing it. And that's why people support Israel in the government.
Well, if they can do it on YouTube, then so can I. Here, someone says they will run in the end. This is something I thought of. So if things go totally tits up and there's no diplomatic or even a nuking way out of it, and say they somehow give up on Israel, I mean, that's almost the worst option for us as well, because all of them are definitely going to, all of the people of Israel are definitely going to flood into Europe and America. And from there, continue to wage war, I'm sure. Right? Is that not the worst actual outcome, or what?
Here's my, I mean, I think all the outcomes are bad for us here. But
this is why I want predictions. I want like one possible cheery route we can plan for. Not cheery, but like the least bad route is what I want.
Here's the thing: the average Israeli, many Israelis, something like, I believe 30, maybe more %, are already dual citizens.
Yeah.
So what happens is they spend a few months in Israel, a few months in the West, back and forth, back and forth. When you go to JFK Airport in New York City sometime, and you'll notice like the very high proportion of people with locks and dressed up and stuff. So they are people who travel quite a bit already. They already have access. I saw that Spain and Portugal gives any person of Jewish ancestry who claims that they were expelled in 1492 automatic citizenship, which makes them automatic. So they already can get into our countries however they want. However, I see that perspective. I mean, you saw on October 7th, they were running for the hills. Like, they were going for the exits. They're packing that airport as soon as that happened, which also is sort of symbolic, because contrast that behavior, one little violation of your personal comfort, like one day you feel like you're under attack after years of doing it to other people, and you run for the exits. Meanwhile, the Palestinians, they've been put in these open air concentration camps since 1948, sporadically killed, no job prospects. They keep their caloric input very low on purpose, and so on. You're an occupied people, and they refuse to leave. The Israelis have been offering Palestinians in different segments to leave that area for Europe, for Latin America, for other places since the 60s, and the Palestinians refuse to leave. So look at that contrast, and that tells you whose land that is. It's the people that are willing to die by the thousands, tens of thousands, willing to sacrifice their wives and children.
See, that's the kind of little insight that you do that is so amazing. that you don't hear from other people. That's absolutely true what you just said, and it's from an angle that you don't hear from anybody. And I don't know, you just come up with these things. Your brain works and just I don't know where you read things
a special brain.
well, I don't know. It's your brain or where you get your information, but I never heard it put that way before. But that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you know whose land it is. And obviously, in Ireland, I think the reason why Irish people feel such kinship to the Palestinian cause is because it is a very similar story. Although, and I don't want to offend my Irish friends, the actual British were not nearly as horrific as the Israelis are.
No, I know, but it's also a very it's just completely tied in here with the whole situation here. If you're a Protestant Irish, you support Israel, and it's always been the way, right? And they probably maybe I don't know if they actually, I wouldn't be so sure they still do in a homogeneous way, but that's what drives that sentiment here. I mean, that's a long-standing old thing. That's the kind of thing that would, there's nothing you can do about that. Like, so, there's not going to be any of the laws that are being passed in America are not going to happen here. I could say that. Which the ones you were alluding to at the beginning, where it's illegal to be anti-Semitic, and even, I heard verses from the Bible are now potentially, you're going to get thrown in jail for, the laws, the package that you were saying they passed and everything. It's so ludicrous. Right. And it's passed, right? So is that definitely in the pipeline? Is that definitely something that's going to happen?
It's in the Senate, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which says that it virtually defines anti-Semitism in a way that makes any type of policy debate on America's funding for Israel impossible.
So you think that's going to happen? Is that going to happen? Like, is it? What do you think?
Well, I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, if it passed through the House of Representatives, then the Senate is almost a shoo-in.
So what are you going to do then? For what you're saying even now? Like, I'm in Ireland. I assume I'm safe from this. But could they, you be arrested for just what you're saying now when this happens?
No, that's not exactly what it is. It's more so if you have like a public institution, like a university.
Oh, right.
And anybody at that university publicly disagrees with Israel, you lose your government funding.
Okay.
It's not like they're not taking people to jail yet.
Yeah.
Right. But you can see, this is something else I'll say about the leftists that are protesting this. Completely different than when they were protesting in 2020 against, the anti-white protests of the BLM, right? You see, back then, there were no consequences. You didn't get punished. You didn't go to jail. If you did, you got out immediately, and Kamala Harris would pay your bail. The entire media, corporate establishment, every NGO was on your side. And so that, as a protest, was what? A LARP. It was a LARP. A LARP that killed people, but a LARP nevertheless. This time, on this issue, the left has no support from the media, no support from the corporations, no support from the government. In fact, the opposite is true. They are being attacked by their former groomers. They're being pummeled. Now they're losing their jobs. They're going to jail. They're being sued. They're being fired. It's quite remarkable. Now, it's not a real protest unless there are consequences for protesting. That's how you know it's real.
Finally, after 20 or more years, they can say they're they're not in the mainstream any longer. They're actually dissenters. That they believed they were all this time and they weren't. Now they actually are.
And unfortunately, now the right are the ones that are attacking free speech.
Yeah.
So imagine
that's exposing them too. So that's something you've spoken about for a while. That's truly exposing them now, as well as the kind of grifters and
It's
You
more
know,
than
they aren't
that.
all. Yeah, to be honest, a lot of them aren't, and I've been surprised by the ones that haven't, that have come around and seen reason. Like even there's a lot of dissent. You have to admit as well.
No, for
No?
sure. The new right. Remember the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act encountered tons of resistance from Republicans in the House.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen Jewish commentators from the Jewish, nice Jewish people commentators were remarking on this as the new right. Okay, so Tucker Carlson more skeptical on these issues.
Yeah, even Alex Jones made a post about it recently. I was like, "Whoa, Alex Jones!" I thought he was a firm Zionist.
I mean, the thing is that I think what is the behavior of Israel and America's support for it is so morally repulsive. I always compare it to ISIS, right? Like,
yeah,
imagine we live in an alternative dimension where Alex Jones's his banned video, right? That's his streaming platform, was developed for him by ISIS. And so one day the videos come out of all of ISIS's heinous crimes. The whole world is saying we gotta blow ISIS away. Let's put aside all of our differences to stop ISIS. But then you're in this situation where like you owe ISIS favors, you get money from ISIS, they kind of handle you. And so you're in this awkward spot where eventually you just have to go, you know what? To hell with ISIS. You're right, they are bad. And that's the relationship they have with Israel. The way Israel is behaving, mass murdering women and children, pulling babies out of it, starving people to death. It's no different than ISIS.
What's like the mass grave thing they found recently? How positive is that? As like that was really bad. Is that like for sure? Like I don't know. I haven't tried. I haven't looked into the reverse side in the media or anything.
Well, over here in America, they barely covered it.
Right.
But when asked about it, the Israeli government said that it's an anti-Semitic blood libel to even recommend such a thing. But at the same time,
how do you mean? To recommend the what? To say it happened, or to what? How do you mean?
They said the mass grave is completely fake. Hamas faked it. It's a blood libel.
All right. Okay.
However, the United Nations says it's real.
Oh, do they?
Okay. Yeah, right. And they're being investigated for war crimes over it. So, it's like my friend Ward Balog says, they're borrowing credit from their old stuff. I won't say too many details, but they have a lot of old things that they dine out on, they use, that everyone believes. But now they keep referencing those things to try to cover up the new things. The problem is this is the age of cell phone videos and social media where we can see that they're lying in real time. You have videos of people, hospital workers, with their hands tied behind their backs, victims of field executions. You have children in the graves. Some of them were buried alive, according to the autopsies. They tied people, civilians, with their hands behind their backs and buried them alive. I mean, this is something that is so, I don't think you even see this in Africa right now.
The measure of, the measure of violence, of debauched violence, excess violence. But yeah, right. Yes. Well, shit. I mean, that's bad. That's really bad. And like, what are they thinking if that's true? What are they thinking? What kind of plan is this? What is their plan? What could it possibly be at this point? What would they do from here?
I don't think they have a plan. I think they're indulging a sort of sadism that, perhaps we, Westerners, European Christians, whatever you want to call it, don't understand. Like, it's because it's a different people. These are different people with a different culture and a different outlook and a different relationship to people that are not in their group, where, that type of behavior for them. And I want to say, like, I don't think even Benjamin Netanyahu is like personally ordering grab all these hospital workers, tie them up, and bury them alive. What it is that he's losing control. The Israeli military is a third world military with first world technology provided by the West. So there's very little discipline. And so these field commanders, these Israeli field commanders, some of them who have very barbaric and savage views and don't care what they call the goyim think of their actions. These people, they don't have any political calculations to make like Benjamin Netanyahu. And so I think these decisions to, for example, kill the World Central Kitchen workers who were all Europeans.
So you're pro Netanyahu. You're a Netanyahu sympathizer.
It's not that. It's that compared to other people in Israel, Netanyahu is the sane one.
Well, he's probably a pretty smart guy. He seems like he's a smart guy in his way. The shrewd. He looks shrewd. I don't know. Maybe like a lot of their plans and things they've done are pretty crazy and like pretty like hyper defensive. Like again, the Samson option thing. Like that is so insane. Such a bizarre threat to give the entire world, to like threaten to nuke unrelated nations, and like openly, should they, fall prey to lose their war basically. So like for me, in terms of the wars going on in the world, it's the nuke thing that I want to avoid. The exchange of nukes is the thing that worries me the most. That it could, as you say, and crazy things are getting, not just in the Middle East, but in Ukraine and everything else.
Well, so isn't that like the ultimate, like losing at checkers to your son and then throwing the checkerboard in the air? That's the Samson option.
It is, but it's also the death of possibly all of us, And not, even if it's a small exchange, it's the most brutal thing imaginable. To even be dancing find ourselves in the midst of that particular dance is so insane and so bad. And so this is what we are faced with. So I always wonder, like, in terms of that, this is what I wonder, why it's so important to think geopolitically as you do and strategically, and wonder about the other nations around Israel and how it might play out in that effect. Does Iran have a nuclear bomb now? Will they get one? What's the likely? Because whenever, obviously, there's the standoff that happens when the potential for nukes are involved. And does the other nation have nukes? How far should we push? Like, you're saying you feel they're extremely barbaric and they're willing to go to extreme lengths. Like, do you think it may come to that? And this is what I wonder about prediction wise. Like, well, how will the geopolitics play out if say if things continue along the track they are now? What would you conceive of happening? And if the nuclear threat is sufficient and on both sides, depending on all the other nations and what's going on, including Russia and America in particular, that would be the factor that forces people to back away from whatever they're doing, or push it further to a possible exchange. Like, what? I know it's very hard to say what will happen, but what do you think?
Well, let's get the first thing off the table. Israel's nukes are illegal. In fact, the United States has a policy where they can't acknowledge that Israel has nukes, even though everyone knows. The U.S. government cannot officially acknowledge that Israel has nukes because, according to State Department law and regulation, it's not allowed to aid countries with illegal nuclear weapons. So there's that.
All right.
Then the second thing is, are the Israelis willing to use a nuke? Absolutely. No doubt about it, immediately.
Really?
If there was a full war with Iran, not just an exchange of rockets, but like an actual full-on war, Israel would lose. Israel would lose because they'd be attacked by the Houthis, they'd be attacked by Hezbollah, and they'd be attacked by Iran, and then Hamas from inside. They're done. So in such circumstances, this is why the Ayatollah says strategic patience. He says, yes, because the Ayatollah of Iran is constantly pushed by nationalists who say, you let the Israelis bomb our embassy, assassinate our scientists, they get away with all this stuff, and you don't respond with full force. And his response is basically, we need to have strategic patience. We're winning the long game. And they are. But that long game just ends abruptly if the Israelis start launching their nukes at you. So they're trying to avoid this.
What is surely they've considered that. So what do you think is in their long game in terms of that possible inevitability? Like,
well, if you look at what the Iranians are doing now, they're working with China and Russia to become diplomatically engaged in the global community again. So you saw that Iran recently joined the BRICS. China refuses to sanction Iran. Antony Blinken is, he's a Zionist. He went to China and demanded that they sanction Iran and Russia. And the Chinese are like, why? I'm not going to do that. To hell with what you think. So the Iranians are actually, they're becoming diplomatically rehabilitated by China and Russia. So they're winning the diplomatic war. Economically, they're developing themselves again through China and Russia. So they want to have that. But then also at the same time, they want to, because basically Iran just wants to exist as a nation. America is the one that says, no, you're not allowed to exist. So, I mean, think about that. What kind of situation that puts you in?
Yeah.
So, and the main thing that Iran has accomplished is the decline in intra-Muslim sectarian warfare. So, for decades, the Sunni versus Shia war has been sort of this shadow war between the Iranians and the Saudis, which are backed by Israel, and that was brokered by the Chinese against America's will, where they made peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This completely changed the ball game. A lot of this intra-Muslim infighting has ended. So America now.
Okay, so Saudis are sort of, what do you think is going to happen? You think Saudis are giving up their alliance with America somewhat? Is that what you're saying?
It's very confusing because if you read, you want to talk about nuclear weapons. Yeah. America is offering the Saudis a nuclear program in exchange for normalizing ties with Israel, if you can wrap your mind around that.
Oh, my God.
So they want to make Saudi Arabia a nuclear power in order to use it as a buffer against Iran in favor of Israel. But of course, in exchange for that, this is the agreement that's being discussed as we speak with Saudi Arabia. The United States plans to give Saudi Arabia a security agreement where basically if anyone attacks Saudi Arabia, America automatically goes to war with them. The second thing, preferential investment. I don't know if you saw that fake city they're building in the desert. That a lot of that. Yeah. Well, the new one that they're building is being built through, Jewish American community finance. This is part of the program for normalization. And then the third thing is a nuclear program. America will help Saudi Arabia with a nuclear program. Now, they're saying it will be for peaceful energy production. Well, but I would ask this. Why does one of the top exporters of oil in the world, where a gallon of gas might cost 25 cents, why do they need alternative energy?
Yeah. So you think they'll go for that, or like you don't know, obviously, but
I don't know because the Saudis are kind of playing hardball because they know that this is the only thing America cares about. They don't care about America in Washington.
No.
They care about Israel. And the Saudis know this. And so they're trying to get as much as possible. And they're playing bad cop on some fronts. For example, at OPEC, they basically have made Russia into a member of OPEC, which is infuriating Washington. They're in the BRICS. They joined the BRICS. They're working with China. They did that negotiation with China, with Iran. They recognized Assad after 10 years of trying to overthrow him in Syria. So they're trying to sort of pull away from America, mostly because they sense that the American empire is about to collapse. Do you want a
Well,
security agreement from a collapsing empire? I don't know.
exactly, yeah, and it is going to collapse. I don't think almost anybody who can see anything can see that it's going to collapse. It's just a matter of time. And I know you think that, but like that would be another thing I would wonder. I wonder if you have an opinion on like how long will that take? I've understood it could take, if we're looking at comparing it to Rome or something, it could take another century, but it feels I'd be hard pressed to feel it would carry on for another century the way it is.
Well, I have a 3-part series called The Collapse of the American Empire.
On Latoria, is it?
Yes. I'm very proud of the research here. And
yes, you should be. Your research is amazing.
I appreciate you. The comparison I make is not to Rome, but to the Soviet Union in the Brezhnev era of stagnation. So Sovietologists, I mean, there was all this in the 70s, all this literature, very similar to stuff you see from neoliberals today about how America is inevitable, liberalism is inevitable, it can't ever collapse, turbo America. Well, people
the end of history. Yeah.
Right. In the 70s, Sovietologists were writing crap like that about the Soviet Union.
Sovietologists, is that the term? I never heard this. Sovietologists.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
there's one book called like Sovieticus hominid or something
in Latin. Sovieticus. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, how the Soviet Union like somehow like transformed its people into in a way where they can't ever be anything but communists. Like, you know, it's that kind of failure of imagination that you see among academics in general. But there were some dissenting opinions in the 70s, where they realized one thing. The Soviet Union's life expectancy began to drop after several decades of increasing. The infant mortality rate of the Soviet
Union. This was in the 70s, you say?
Yes. In the era of stagnation, it's called the Brezhnev era of stagnation.
Right.
And so what was really going on by the late 70s that was causing, deaths of despair, alcoholism was through the roof. Suicide was rising. And what was causing this was, in my opinion, this is my own opinion, you can take it or leave it, the fact that the ethnic Russian core of the Soviet Union was becoming a minority in its own empire.
Okay.
Are you? Yeah,
I am sorry.
No. So the Russians were becoming a minority inside of their own empire, and it was by the late 75% of the Soviet population. Ethnic Russians.
Really? Because of their values of internationalism and racial equality, etc.
More so because of the high birth rates of Central Asians in the Soviet Union. They didn't have any immigration. It was the non-European parts of the Soviet Union were breeding very high rates, while the European parts had the same birth rate as Western Europeans.
Right.
So they were quickly dwindling in numbers, percentage-wise.
Right.
And look at America, you see almost an uncanny similarity. The people become. Go ahead.
I'm just curious about this because I didn't actually know this theory about the Soviet era, and I didn't know this. So they turned that around through the 80s and 90s a little bit, obviously.
Well, yes, and I'll tell you why. The Soviet Empire collapsed, and they allowed all these countries to have independence. So the Soviet Union became just Russian. So it went from being 50% Russian to 85% Russian overnight.
Because they let go of Mongolia and all these places. Is basically
and Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and all the stands.
And that's the only reason. It wasn't like their birth rates just turned around as soon as because obviously capitalism wouldn't be the answer either to sustain that. I had a Russian taxi driver recently, and he explained to me in great detail how Russian is an empire and there's the different races in it, but the people that you commonly think of Russian aren't really. There was a high Russian, which is a sort of blonde, blue-eyed kind of person.
They're Vikings.
Not necessarily particularly Slavic or whatever. And he was going on about how they were the true original Russians or something. Anyways, I'm digressing. The Rus, the Rus, which were they were some Viking descended people out there as well. But I mean, that's just an anecdotal story. Pardon me for interjecting that. But it's relevant. It is relevant to exactly what you're saying. I mean, that whatever's left of the high Russians.
Right.
I don't
But you
know.
know, I think that the vast majority of Russians are Europeans like anyone else. Anyone who
Yeah.
tells me Russians are not part of the Western family because I don't know, they're Orthodox Christian. Well, who has the best ballets? Who do you read at school? Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, all these parts of the Western canon. You can't say,
and I didn't mean by my story to say anything denigrating towards Slavs, because they are definitely high, just like normal people of our type. And in fact, they're actually quite exceptional. That all the Slavs I know are like the most hardworking people, in like not only hardworking but self-sufficient, and people who've retained generally some strain of hardness that we've lost, and very admirable. So I didn't mean
I've
to
always
suggest that.
said this. I've always said this about Serbian women. When I used to meet women from the Balkans in New York City, I'd be like, you know, they're quite beautiful. They're very unique and beautiful in their own way. But boy, do they look like they've seen some shit. Like they're really hard looking. They're really
any Eastern European you meet is generally like a hard case. Like I got some buddies from Croatia. I was with them there a few weeks ago, and like I'm sitting there drinking with them, and the two of them, and they live together and everything. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, they start arguing about some fucking stupid historical thing, like who. One of them thought that you know, Islam conquers by the sword, but so did Christianity was just as bad, and they almost came to blows right in front of me over this. I was like, "This is so." I loved it. I thought it was great, but that's typical. They're just gonna be like they're hard cases, and it's great. I mean, since we've become such a bunch of simpering fucking.
Oh yeah, forget about it. The thing with Balkan people, it's all fun and games until somebody gets ethnically cleansed. I mean, you don't want to get involved. Sometimes I even lose track of who hates who. I'm like, you know, okay, Albanians versus Serbs, but then also Croatians hate Serbs, but also Serbs are against NATO, and so it's just you know, gets complicated.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They come from eternal conflict. But I do love their self-sufficiency. Like it seems like they always you know, they always know how to fix their own shit and do all this kind of old school stuff that I remember, like people being the same back in Canada, like when I was young. I'm getting old now. That it seems completely lost. Everybody's gotten used to this kind of disposable commercial culture in the West, and they don't know how to be. This self-sufficiency is a spirit that's really leaked out of us, I think. I'm digressing again, sorry.
You know what's interesting though is that I don't know when you've been to, if you have you been to Canada lately, but
no,
this is something else I've written about, is that the divergence in living standards between Canadians and Americans and like Russians or Croatians, Poles, that there's an argument to be made that our living standards are lowering and theirs are rising.
Mm-hmm.
And soon it will get to a point where if the situation continues to develop, where now Russia is the top growing economy in Europe, despite all the sanctions, like if that situation continues, there's a possibility that one day soon, like in the next few years, the average Russian will have a higher standard of living than the average Canadian in some regards. I mean, I
wouldn't doubt if they already do. I really wouldn't doubt if they often, you know, not everywhere, but that many of them certainly do. Yeah, because I didn't go to Canada for a while, but even back in the time that I was going, I definitely noticed everything slowly dropping. And as you would expect in all of our countries, you can't like invite these disparate groups, competing groups, and like expect everything to hold together. And it is slowly falling apart. Yeah, but even sorry.
This goes to my point about the civilizational crisis that the Brezhnev era in the Soviet Union had, is that they had this big problem in the 70s where Russian workers were very unproductive. They were drunk on the job. They didn't the products they were making were shoddy, and people were blaming communism for this. But 10 years before, that wasn't true. Russians were very hardworking in the Soviet Union. What was really going on, and you see it in America today. I don't know about the rest of the West, but in America, I see it myself. They're not drunk, but they're stoned. Everyone here is at work and they're high as hell. You see the crisis with Boeing, the airplane manufacturer, America's big ticket, most famous aeronautics company, and they find that the new airplanes they make, the doors keep flying off in midair. Like, you know, and that's because if you saw the documentary made about it, the workers at the plant are literally stoned. And it's not just the black ones, in case anyone's wondering. The white ones
I do hear a lot. Yeah, people are always taking Adderall over there and stuff like this. I keep hearing about that. Although Adderall should probably potentially make you a better worker, I guess. I don't know.
Oh,
but
yeah.
What were they doing in the Soviet times? What drug were they doing then? Do you think that fucked them up?
Oh, just vodka. They were just drunk.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So
general depression from the state of things, the state of their lives made them just turn to drinking drugs, basically, is it?
Well, not just that, but also if you're becoming a minority in your own country, you simply don't see the point in working hard, because what you're going to leave behind is not going to be for your children or your people, but for somebody else.
Yeah, right.
It takes a lot of the drive of human genius and creativity out of people. Why would you want to work? Why would you want to build a beautiful cathedral or a beautiful building or anything? Why would you want to accomplish anything that's supposed to live beyond your immediate, genitals and stomach, right? Anything that's selfless, that's collective, any grand achievement of that kind. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to make sacrifices when, the next generation is not going to have anything in common with you, racially, culturally, and otherwise?
No, it's true. Yeah, when you feel everything set against you, when you're not in an upward striving course, united with, if you can't think of your nation tribally, it makes no sense. And it's true. Yeah, and you can feel that, and for any of us that are working, you have to. So even say you and I might have to work for money, etc., but we pursue you feel real. The real purpose of your life is in this hobbyist activity of saying these naughty things online or whatever, because it is have more reason, more purpose for you overall, because we're, it's more real. If something isn't tied genealogically and tribally and culturally, if you've lost that tie, it's meaningless. And so you're right, that's exactly what they're doing. So I guess the average person can't figure out that association is lost, and they turn to drinking drugs to fill a void that they just can't understand what's missing or what's wrong, because they're not allowed to.
It's nihilism.
Nihilism.
Yeah. When you feel enemy, when you feel disconnected from your surroundings, you turn to nihilism. And there is such, I don't know about Ireland, I know it's not the same there, but here in America, Brandon, the nihilism is it's just seeping out of people's pores. Everyone is just horrible in the society and the culture right now. Just such horrible, just viciousness, unforgiving, suicidal. We have this drug problem in this country where 120,000 Americans died from a drug overdose last year. This is higher than the entire European Union put together times 10. So
yeah.
What does that tell you? That's a society that's failed. That's a failed state.
I can sense that in Americans. It is true. Is maybe worse over there, because Europeans, no matter what, even though things are bad for us, and even though I'm not Irish. I mean, I am technically, but I'm not. I grew up in Canada, so I'm always a foreigner here. So I can only observe as a foreigner. But they definitely have, not just Irish, but any European retains a tie to their tribalism and their culture, despite everything else, that is stronger than you find in America or Canada, because we kind of broke it with our long ago, let's say, right? Because we already became mixed over a long time. And despite the fact, when I grew up in Canada, you'd always ask, whenever you met anybody, you'd be like, what's your last name? Where are you really from? Kind of thing. You know what I mean? There's a limit to being Canadian in a sense. And there was somewhere else that you were really from. So that tie still exists here, and I can see it in them. And they're sort of oblivious to the fact it's not that it's against the modern system. They kind of tie it in. They find ways to tie it into their daily life. But I do notice online from Americans, you're right, a lot of nihilism, a lot of decadence, particularly sexual decadence, which is, you could say, I'm posting nudes online. I'm not,
but that's
I don't.
normal.
Yeah, I know what a certain level of sex is normal. I'm not a prude about, and neither
It's
are
the
the
gay
Irish.
stuff. Sorry, can I say it on YouTube?
Yeah,
It's
the gay stuff.
it's the homosexuality that's what's abnormal. And what are Americans known for in the world? Like, you go to an American embassy, what's the flag flying? It's not the American flag. It's not even the gay flag anymore. It's this new flag that has like the tranny colors. It's a gay flag.
Are they really flying those at the embassy? I didn't even notice that. Have they gone that far? I didn't even notice that. I thought it was
think
still
they passed a law recently to put them away, but they had this new flag. It has the tranny colors, the cotton candy. It's a rainbow flag with the cotton candy ensigns, and also the black and brown ensigns, because they say just because they're gay, it doesn't mean they don't also hate white people. They hate white people too. And that's the flag that they're like, we're the United States, the gay anti-white country.
It's so meaningless. And like, it's so infantile to do that. It's so stupid. Like, that's so bad. Like, so dumb.
You're right that it's infantile and stupid, but here's the problem. If the US government is the superpower of the world, your fate, even in Europe, your fate is in the hands of the infantile and stupid, which is why I'm excited to see the American empire decline, personally.
Yes. So originally this question was, and we're only coming back to it now, how long do you think it will take for the American empire to collapse?
Giving a hard and fast prediction. Let's use history. I like to think like Toynbee, like Spengler. I like to think cyclically.
Excellent. Yes, perennialism. It's a fact.
Right. Let's look at America like it's the Soviet Union 1978, because that's all the symptoms are there. The life expectancy in the United States in the last 4 years has fallen. The only Western country for this to happen. It's fallen by 3 years. It's now 74. It's lower than China's. The average American lives less than the Chinese.
And it's probably even less than they're willing to report on it.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
The infant mortality rate has risen. So think about it this way. If you have a child in the United States, there's the highest probability of any other Western country that your child will die in the first year. You have, America clusters with the third world, not even the second world, the third world. If you talk about second world like China and Russia, America clusters increasingly more with the third world. Russia has a lower infant mortality rate than America does right now. We look at things from that perspective. It looks a lot like the Soviet Union in the late 70s. So if we take that as a metric, I give this country another 10, 15 years as an empire. As a country, I don't know. As an empire, as a global hegemon, 10, 15 years tops. Arguably, it's already not the global hegemon. That now you already have counters to it like China and Russia.
Arguably, yeah. So that's hard. That's a hard one to assess, isn't it? I mean, we live behind the rainbow curtain. So we can only say, just as the Soviets did back in their day, they can only, it seems like the world to them, but
we're in the Bergheim bathroom.
Yeah, that's us. That's us. But it does seem, again, it comes down to nukes in my mind. Who's willing to use them? When will, could they come into play? How much will you threaten them? Because America does have a lot of nukes.
And a lot of nihilism.
It's still impossible to invade America, even though they're destroying themselves from the inside out very rapidly.
You don't need to invade America. You just got to wait it out if you're an adversary. But the thing you said about nukes,
that's my biggest fear, is that on the way down, on the way out, on the way down, and they're so crazy. It seems so crazy right now that they will, there'll be an exchange of nukes again, or that this, because I even at a few points there with the Ukraine thing, you see commentator Piers Morgan and people like calling for it, like we must, they were just unabashedly threatening it and calling for we must escalate this war and get be as hard about it as we can, and it just seems so crazy to me.
Piers Morgan wants a nuclear war? Are you fucking kidding me?
No, this is a while ago now, but yeah,
maybe a cockroach like him would survive it. Maybe
he was making these arguments that he was making arguments at the time, like, oh, it's not so bad, it's not the way you think. You can have a tactical nuke here and there, and it's not a big deal.
Oh yeah, it's just like just like a hangover. Get over it.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, these guys. This is a point though back to American nihilism. The combination of nukes and nihilism is a terrifying one.
And decline.
Yes, right. So if the regime in the United States was existentially threatened, it would absolutely use the nukes. However, if it's this slow, gradual process of just weakening, it might be over before they realize it. I don't know.
Well, usually it is. And in fact, I believe it is already over.
Yeah.
But, however long it takes them to realize it is the tricky part. I believe they can carry on like a zombie for many decades. In fact, if it's the normal person, the average person, and what their level of realization is. I'm not sure how this even comes into play, how important it is. It seems more like other forces are more important in terms of the realization that you're over, your time is finished. And even then, what will happen? Say America and Europe, with all the disparate groups they brought into them, it seems likely to me they'll break up into smaller nations within their nations. I don't see them. What do you think about that? People say it'd be no problem. We're going to march everybody out as soon as it's all over. But I don't know.
One debate I've had here for many years is, like Russia in the Soviet context, if you let go of California, Texas, and New York City, perhaps a few areas around there, maybe Florida, you'll wake up to an 80% white country full of resources with a massive population. If you just let go of those few states.
Just let them go.
And America, I think, would be a superpower in those conditions. I think that, that's an argument that I've had that people don't like to hear it. People are irredentists. Nationalists are irredentists. But
what does that mean? Irredentist? I don't even know that. What does that mean again?
That means they don't want to give up any territory.
Right.
No matter what. It's off the table. But I think America is huge. I mean, the reason why, the Germans were irredentists is because their country's tightly packed like sardines. They have a large population. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I froze for a second there, I think. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. The reason why Germans and Serbians are irredentists is because they have a large population and small land. But America is massive.
Yeah.
So
I didn't realize till I have a Hungarian friend. He only showed me how much Hungary lost after the war, how much of their country was lost. I didn't realize it was 2/3 of the nation was just simply torn away from them and given up. All these places, the land that they've already lost, the borders are always changing, which is funny in a way. The nations can be these organic forms. You look over long periods of time and their shape changes like cells butting up against each other.
Oh, Hungary.
Hungary, what? Yeah, go on.
Hungary lost an immense amount of territory after World War I as well.
Was it really? Okay.
Yeah, they have this really terrible luck with the alliances they pick compared to their historic rival Romania. Romania always gets in at the right time, changing sides and so on, and they end up getting all the land. It's a really fascinating historical curse that the Hungarians have had, where World War I and II, they lost tons of their land.
I didn't know that World War I. Shit, that as well. I mean, that's sad. That's very sad. But that's definitely what we're facing across Europe as well, I think, because I don't see. I mean, people are so soft, as we know. What could it take to actually turn them around to do what is necessary? You know what I mean? It's far more likely, even say your vision of America, where you just give up on New York and California, that still involves, erecting a wall, really closing yourself off and saying, okay, like the conditions of it we are so far away from that, realizing it, even though it's utterly necessary and inevitable in some way. I don't know what would it take to get people to realize what they have to do? Obviously, a disaster of some kind, something bad.
Well, I think that one thing the American empire domestically will never be able to survive is de-dollarization. The sudden people waking up one day and the US dollar is the Argentine peso or the Zimbabwean dollar. And I think that's going to happen. That's going to happen in the near future. If the only thing keeping keeping Americans from just going out and on shooting sprees, I'm not even going to say it's political, because it's not. Just the nihilism. The only thing keeping people from fully indulging their nihilism to the ultimate point of killing and looting and so on. And this includes all Americans, honestly, of all races.
This is the normal, real, when you boil it down, yeah.
The only thing is the prospect of economic of an economic better day. If the stock market collapses and people start actually having to go through poverty and need, soup kitchens and so on, like, I don't think this country could survive another Great Depression with 30% unemployment. It just won't survive. The country will literally implode.
Implode though. Like, I wonder what form would that take? Like, Jesus Christ, it would be like total unrest, just mass crazy riots being filmed on cameras, and just total insanity, I guess, until and even to get it back to a sane point, they would have to adopt some of our value principles politically at some point, somehow. I mean, and through the fog of like chaos, utter chaos.
Have you heard of the
dollar claps the way you say? If the dollar claps the way you say, so you got mass unemployment, you've got like something akin to the Great Depression, only with diversity and trannies.
Right. All the terrible. Remember the Karl Popper trade-off? It's Karl Popper says we could get these people, we could get Western people to agree to the principles of displacement and openness and liberalism, as long as we have a strong safety net and a high living standard, right? He was forced that this is the father of social democracy. That we can prevent another situation like the 1930s like this. And so if in the social contract, the economic trade-off of tolerating, because that's what people don't know, is white people tolerate the situation. They don't know. Yeah. White people don't like it. It's tolerating it. And that's because people are like, well, yeah, I don't like how my community is changing, but my house is worth $350,000 on the market, and so I'm wealthy. Once these trade-offs are no longer economic trade-offs for cultural, social, and racial ones, no longer make any sense, then you have a problem. You have a problem because the American elite are fully discredited. They have no legitimacy. Okay, so you have a real powder keg in this country. I don't see people talking about it. I mean, one example I want to give you. Have you heard of this new movie, Civil War?
No. What is it?
There's a movie out in the theaters, and it's a sleeper hit, and it's called Civil War. It's got Kirsten Dunst in it. And the premise of the movie is a civil war in the United States.
Right.
And I went to see it, right? And I noticed I went to see it in a bougie area, but I noticed a lot of people that were sitting in the theater were kind of like these, like the type of people that went to January 6th.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, did you catch that?
I did, yeah. I caught everything. Did I freeze up? If I freeze up, I think you're okay. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So I saw a lot of people, they looked like they were Trump fans. Let's just say that. And the theater was full of them. And I could tell why they wanted to see this movie.
Because they wanted it to happen.
Well, many people let's just say a lot of people are
Yeah.
visual learners.
Hmm.
And so simply portrayals of something like that movie does is enough to plant a seed that could be watered later. Because people are really, the people are, I can't stress to you, you haven't been here in the Americas in a while. I can't stress to you just how angry on the brink of snapping, like everyone in America is. I don't know about Canada, but in America, people are really angry all the time. Like, you know, people don't laugh anymore. They don't do jokes anymore. There's nothing. People are just really resentful, miserable, all political persuasions, left wing, right wing. And no one believes in the government. No one believes in American institutions anymore. They used to have the left, but now with this Gaza Palestine stuff, they've lost the left. So the American system is completely discredited. There's an increased distance between the elites and the people they rule, one that is not sustainable, in my opinion, and historically has not been sustainable for other empires. And so, you know, I don't know.
So why are these elites so fucking stupid that they can't see any of these things we see? I mean, maybe they are. Do they have some kind of, like, people like conspiracy types think they have a plan? They're going to go live on the moon or in a bunker or something. They must just be so blinkingly stupid that they, you know, they're happy to be kings of trash.
I don't think that the very top is all that stupid.
Oh,
the
really?
problem is the problem they have. You know, how do I say this? You know, there's the problem they have is that the people in charge are part of one group, one ethno-religious group. Okay. And the divergence between what they want and the people is very large. There's a huge gulf between what America's ethno-religious elites like Antony Blinken or Merrick Garland or the Doug Emhoff or any of these people, their views of what is good for their people, which is what drives them, okay? It's what actually drives them, is counter, even irreconcilable with what's good for the average American. So before, they were able to control this through the mass media, through control of the media, right? You have a few newspapers and TV channels where you get all your information. But now that communication has been facilitated between people without this buffer, without this ethno-religious group having total control over the conversation, people are having different conversations about, hey, does giving $100 billion to the Zionist projects of Ukraine and Israel to wage war in the interest of the American taxpayer while inflation is out of control, while there's potholes on all the roads, while our bridges are collapsing? Like, is this good for us? Is this what's good for Americans? And the answer is no. But it is good for the ethno-religious elite. And so it's
not ultimately good for them, is it, though? It's a bad plan, you must admit. Overall, it seems to me a bad plan. Like,
well, I'm very reluctant to call them dumb or stupid because ultimately they're 2% of the population dominating the rest of us.
Well, that's in the moment. But say in their long-term plan, they had this nation of America, incredibly powerful. All these evangelicals and so forth that utterly supported them in every possible way. And in fact, in terms of their war, they're waging in the Middle East that this is about, you know, that would have been a great benefit to them. But they've spoiled it. They've destroyed it. It's going to, you know, it's not going to be a superpower for long. I think almost anybody would admit that. You know, so that's not very smart of them. If they'd kept it the way it was, you know, wouldn't it have been a smarter plan?
There's a historical precedent for this. This has happened to them before. they're very good at they're very good at taking power, not good at managing empire. So they're very good at influence. They're very good at controlling narratives, social engineering, financial domination. Very bad with the day-to-day needs of managing an empire. We see this with the Soviet Union following the Bolshevik Revolution, where it was a stroke of genius. They toppled the superpower, the monarchy, and they took power basically through a criminal conspiracy of a handful of this ethnic religious group, a bunch of college students basically, overthrew this massive empire. In 1905, in 1900, the world was paranoid that Russia was going to conquer all of Asia, and 17 years later, a small group of like bandits of evil nerds go and walk in and take power. I mean, think of the amazingness of that. So
it is amazing. Yeah.
Very great.
And you like that. You always like that. I heard you say once, I believe, that you consider yourself something of a Leninist. Am I wrong? Did I hear you say that once?
We could call it Leninism. It's vanguardism. It's just a political theory of vanguardism, is that a small group of intellectuals sharpen their arguments and strategies and lead the people. I mean, I think that's a pretty universal political strategy that can be applied in any context. And in their case, think about the power of a well-organized minority and how they're able to take down this empire. It's quite amazing.
Well, it was the events of World War I really, where they took advantage of that, obviously.
Sure,
right?
But the Russians didn't seem to take advantage of. I mean, they took advantage of it, but there's like tons of other ethnic groups that could have done it too, and they didn't do it.
Yeah.
So give the devil his due, I say.
Well, it was clever how they did it, but just in terms of managing it, yeah, you're right. But you've already said, that they're not good at managing it from there. So
I would add the Ottoman Empire. People don't know this history. The Ottoman Empire was dominated after Suleiman the Magnificent by a family called the Mendez family. These were Sephards that converted to Catholicism and then fled to the Ottoman Empire. They were the wealthiest banking family in the world. And they basically took over the Ottoman palace and formed their geopolitical goals. They were like the neoconservatives of their time. And this Sephardic family was involved in launching the invasions of Europe, the invasion of Cyprus, the Battle of Lepanto.
So they were court advisors or something, or just the banking money
More
interest?
than that, they ran the central bank, the central coffers of the Ottoman Empire, and they had members of their family in almost every royal court in Western Europe.
See, this is why you are so such a vital person. This wealth of this information allocated. This is exactly what I mean. That it can be extracted from you at a moment's notice, across the board.
I would recommend. Thank you. I appreciate it. I would recommend people look up the Mendez banking family and another man, Joseph Nasi, Nasi. These were Sephards that were pushed out of Europe during the Inquisition. They went to Ottoman Turkey. They were behind, again, were in charge, but they led the Ottoman Empire into decline after taking it over. The Battle of Lepanto in 1571, where the Spanish forces effectively dealt a massive defeat to the Ottomans, who seemed invincible prior to this defeat. The largest naval battle in human history, Battle of Lepanto. This was planned. The whole invasion of Cyprus was planned by a group of Sephards in the Ottoman court. And after this, the Ottoman Empire began a stage of decline until it became completely irrelevant. The sick man in Europe.
And were they in power around the time of the fall of Constantinople?
In the around that time, yes, they played an enormous role inside of Constantinople, aiding the Turkish conquests. It was in the 13th century in Bursa, which is in southeastern Europe, that how do I say this? The community, this ethno-religious community, played an instrumental role in undermining the local defenders on behalf of the Turks. It was the first time. Then in Constantinople, they did the same thing, and this is a series of a pattern where they.
And do you think this history plays into Turkey's position today at all?
Well, Turkey has always been a bad actor, even within the Islamic world. The great enemy of Turkey for a while were the Persians in the Ottoman times.
Right.
And it seems to me that this dynamic is playing out again. The Turkish nation has been in the thrall of this ethno-religious group's money since at least the late 15th century into the 16th century. And so okay. I'm not sure what can be done about that.
Despite the Young Turks being doing a good job at the moment, that's sort of incidental turnaround. That's not. But Turkey is just an odd anomaly of a place.
Yeah,
it's such an odd place. I'd actually like to go there. My friend Semyagog was there. He lived there for a while, and there's a lot of it's interesting because they have that sort of Roman Greek history as well, and everything. They're also like Eastern Europeans. They're like a place that's eternally at war and all this conflicts in these various tribes, and the way they exist and the way they are formed is fascinating. But,
and they have such a weird policy priority. Like the Turkish government sees like Hungary and the Uyghurs of China as like part of their family or something. Like it just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah,
it's frankly retarded. I mean, it's just.
Well, maybe it makes sense. We can't know these things. I have a lot of more sympathy since I moved to Ireland. You get woken up to these things, and you think like that sounds retarded. And then but you come to realize, there's long-standing reasons for these things that you just never, I don't know. There's always some detail that you've never heard about, and I don't know. It's crazy. These older places, like America. America is. Go on. Sorry. Go on.
Turanism is an absurdity because the Turanist theory holds that Japan and Hungary are like one people because of some ethno-linguistic bullshit, and Turkey sees itself as like the core. This is the central theme of Turkish nationalism. Ataturk created a new nation, a new people from thin air. And it's not really, because some Turks in Istanbul are genetically European. Some Turks on the other side in Anatolia are, basically Arabs. And so you're trying to cobble together a new ethno-state based off people that don't have that much in common ethnically. Like I think this discordance is what leads to Turkey being a discordant influence in
chaos, of course, for chaos.
And think about this. They're in NATO, right? They're the ally of Europe under the American nuclear umbrella. So America is calling the shots. They say Turkey and Europe, we're friends. But then who's bringing in? Who's pushing every time they want some money? They want to hit up Europe for money. They say, well, I'm going to send another 1 million refugees your way unless you give me this investment or this money. They do this sporadically. Is that the behavior of an ally where they're constantly sending millions and millions of migrants to Europe from other parts of the Middle East as a weapon, as a geopolitical tool? Yeah. That's not a fucking friend. This is not in the interest of Europeans to be friends with Turkey. It's all because of the United States forcing Europeans and Turkey to get together because of NATO to fight communism, which doesn't exist anymore. It's an absurdity.
That's why I have some feeling that Turkey is somehow a bit of one of those linchpin nations in this whole business when it comes to a head, that in terms of the neighbors and the people surrounding Israel, that something, depending on what they do, will affect things in a great manner. But Turkey aside, so looking at the other neighbors in the region, let's say, and what about, is there another one that's, depending on what they do, is a major factor? I mean, obviously the Saudis, we've talked about them. We don't know what they're going to do, I guess. What is your feeling? Would you have a feeling? Would you have a guess as to what the Saudis which side they might ultimately take? It seems to me they can't. Go on. Yeah.
They're already on the side of Israel. The question is, how far will they go publicly? Because America's like, you have to be pro-Israel in public too.
Like, I know some Saudis, and my feeling is that, again, they feel the elites in Saudi Arabia are not expressing the opinion of the general population. Let me say that the general population is very much with Palestine,
to say the least.
Yeah.
And remember, the Houthis are right on their border, and they've proven that they can touch them. Remember when they did that awesome drone strike on their oil refineries?
The Houthis are awesome. Amazing. You have to give it to the Houthis. Jesus Christ.
Houthis,
you have to give it to the Houthis.
If I had like the Time Magazine Man of the Year, it would just be the Houthis.
It would be that handsome one. That handsome one that everybody liked on the put him on the
the pirate, yes.
The pirate, the handsome pirate. He was I think he was a male model or something.
Yeah.
I even knew girls. I knew girls like, who is this guy? He's so
yeah. I mean, think of the genius of that. What underdogs? Just pure resourcefulness. And they're bringing America and Britain to their knees in the Red Sea. Like America's like, okay, all right, what do you want? What do you We've had enough. What the hell?
Just like raiding, going on but let's go on a boat and attack this ship. Imagine that.
Yeah, I know. I love the Houthis.
I mean, that's cool, really. It's cool. Well done, Houthis.
No, but I think that the Saudis are in a tough spot because on the one hand, America is willing to give them everything. You want a nuclear program? Done. You want us to build a fake city in the desert? Done. You want security agreements? Done. The problem is though, the man making these promises is has a immunodeficiency virus that is quickly transitioning from the HIV to AIDS. So what good is your security? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when you punch Iran? If you're the Saudis and America and Israel tell you to punch Iran, but then America and Israel are declining, America in particular, what are you going to do when it's just you and the Iranians? Like the Saudis already don't have a chance.
And already internationally, anybody who really trusts America as an ally, really, they can see very much it's not Americans will say one thing and then do the opposite if they feel like it.
That's another thing.
Right.
That's another thing. So I don't put much stock in anything the Saudis do. I think that they probably will do the normalization. They were on track to be normalized on October 10th. 3 days before, 3 days after October 7th, there was a plan before October 7th for America and Saudi Arabia and Israel to start formalizing these accords where Saudi Arabia would be a formal ally of Israel. And the Hamas attack on October 7th thwarted all of that, completely upended that entire program, that entire architecture. That
do you think it was something to do with that? Do you think it was related to that?
Definitely. That was one of the reasons.
All right. Okay.
And if you want one other controversial opinion I have, I think China and Russia helped Hamas do that attack.
Ooh, that is controversial. But
I think so.
In what way? Help with the tunnels or help whatever?
I think that there's rumors that were put out by the Ukrainians, again, grain of salt. They are saying that the Russians, the Wagner group, helped train Hamas in special forces tactics. Whatever the truth of that is, somebody trained them in special forces attack strategies. Somebody trained Hamas because no one had ever seen Hamas do something like that before. Someone trained them in drone warfare. Someone trained them and someone helped them build those tunnels. That wasn't just them. Okay. And the second reason is they're finding a lot of Russian and Chinese weapons that Hamas is using. And they're not all just Soviet era stuff. They found Chinese rifles, assault rifles, that have a certain handguard that only could possibly have been manufactured in the last decade. So, even if Iran is the conduit, the Russians and Chinese give it to Iran, knowing where it's going to go. My ultimate theory for why they would do this is because they know that Israel, I always say this, Israel is America's balls If Uncle Sam is rampaging through your city, if they're in Ukraine causing you problems, if they're in Taiwan causing you problems, the best way to make Uncle Sam say uncle is to kick him in the balls. Israel is their balls.
Yeah. Well, so it would be a prudent move if that's what they went, and apparently very much maybe that is what they did. But then also, I think I saw you recently talking about the inexplicable nature of U.S. foreign policy, even to this day, even now, and is perhaps just the rampant chaotic nature of the decline and the diversity, etc. With that, in that their foreign relations with other countries while this conflict is going on, that they was it Biden? What was his recent thing? He made some really serious gaffes.
Oh man,
what was it? What was it again?
He went to India and Japan, one of
right.
the two last even middle powers that will tolerate America's bullshit.
Yeah,
outside of Western Europe. He went there and he said that they're racist because they don't let enough immigrants in.
Yeah.
So here you have the United States government funding a literal genocide, a literal racial genocide in Israel, going to Japan and saying, you're the racist because you don't let in immigrants. Again, anyone who's a neutral observer is like, this is a crazy person. These are crazy people. Like, you're funding an actual genocide that the world has condemned. America is the only country that vetoed the ceasefire resolution at the UN, and then they turn around and lecture other countries about human rights.
So that, could there be any rationale for that? Some 3D chess thing, or is it just literally total senility and stupidity?
Well, the American consensus is to create a world where all the people are racially mixed, where there's no more cultures. Globalization is just another word for Americanization. Okay? There's no such thing as globalization. Someone's culture is the one that's going to be globalized, and it's McDonald's, it's Coca-Cola, it's Hollywood, and so on. And so that's the agenda of that ethno-religious elite that controls Washington. It's for the entire world.
So they can't help themselves even for a moment. They can't help themselves even for a moment to be diplomatically, even strategically smart. You know what I mean? Like you would think.
They've been able to whip up nationalism in Ukraine to some degree, but that's only because that's an emergency. If they feel that you're safely in their thrall, that you are effectively a vassal, which Japan is, it's militarily occupied by America and arguably economically controlled by Wall Street. If they feel like you don't have any options, then that's when they impose these values on you. But increasingly, they don't even have the ability to hold Africa. Like they just got kicked out of Niger, and the reason for it is Russia and China. Like recently in Uganda, they passed a bill through their parliament that bans homosexual propaganda. Immediately, the American embassy summoned the government and said, you're not allowed to pass this bill. And they said, well, what are you going to do about it? And they said, well, we're going to sanction you. So what they said is, okay, we'll just do business with China. Their terms are better. Yeah. They don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. But that's so stupid, though. It's so dumb if they're engaged in all these wars. If they can be so limitlessly stupid, it just,
The problem is the managerial, on the managerial level, the people actually believe in this crap, the Obama human rights doctrine.
So that is the problem. You're exactly right. Yeah, exactly. That is the answer. Yeah, you're right.
The very top elites don't believe in anything. They're just manipulators or Machiavellians. But the middling guy at the State Department, this is why they're having problems in Gaza too. A lot of people resigning from the U.S. State Department over what they're doing to the Palestinians because they were trained to be these human rights crusaders. It's like in the Soviet Union reintroducing capitalism, you're going to get people in the Communist Party resigning. So this American Bolshevism that is through human rights, to impose human rights on every last person on the planet, of gay rights, of open borders. There's one anecdote where the government of Tunisia cracked down on black immigration, African immigration, and pushed the immigrants back. And the leader even said, he's like, we're Tunisians, we're not Negroes. He said this. We don't want to be Negroes. That's a quote, by the way. Okay.
Okay, right.
We are not black Africans, was the actual quote. So right. He's cracking down on immigrants and deporting them. The United States got the International Monetary Fund to withhold a tranche of money that was slated for them until they reopen their border. Think of how insidious that is, how nefarious and sinister.
And they did. They didn't turn to Russia, obviously.
Well, that's the question. Will they turn to China and Russia? And so right. America is losing all these countries to China and Russia, mostly because it's extremely annoying. There's one anecdote of
annoying
this,
is weird.
Yeah, there's one anecdote. I forgot which country, but the leader was summoned by the U.S. ambassador, and he was describing this, where he said, the U.S. ambassador, he said to him, "You come to Africa and you lecture me about human rights. The Chinese come to Africa and they build me a superhighway. Who should I join?" You know?
Yeah. Ultimately, the Chinese may not treat them so great, but it won't be as stupid as they won't be joining the downfall of the Western world that we have to suffer through. To whatever length we do have to suffer through it, anyways. But I'm not in America. Yeah, well, go on. Sorry.
I was joking with Warren Balog about on my show War Strike about how the Chinese are building all this infrastructure in like sub-Saharan Africa, like high-speed rail, superhighways, stuff that America can't build anymore. They tried to build high-speed rail in California, and it failed because they just don't have the engineering ability, and it's too corrupt. So the Chinese are building these things for like Botswana. And so I was joking with Warren Balog, what if we wake up 10 years from now and like Botswana has more advanced infrastructure than America?
It'd be like the old days of Rhodesia, Cecil Rhodesia, when it was like had one of the wealthiest economies in the world, like originally, right?
Yeah.
Way back, like competing with America, I believe at the time.
Right. But the Chinese are wise in that they're not actually moving to these countries. They build these pieces of infrastructure for them, and they get paid in raw materials. I mean, that's a better, rather than mingle. They don't mingle with the people or try to make them speak Chinese or force them to be Confucians. They're just purely impersonal business.
That's true. Yeah. I do think ultimately the Chinese would be not the greatest of colonizers. Say better than America. But these are the only options we're given. This is what you've said before, and I agree with. Another century of American rule over the West, and there'll be no more white people. We'll be gone.
White people will disappear.
Luckily, exactly. And you're absolutely right. So luckily, it is collapsing, and it will be gone. But of all the options available, I'd much rather it was Russians than Chinese or somebody else. I know from the Chinese colonized more or less Vancouver, the city I was born in, and just financially and otherwise. But still, it's not. They really only, how can I say it? I don't know. It's another problem, let's say. It's not the American problem, which is worse. You're very good for this kind of tactical choose that other people don't understand this. You must tactically choose an ally. He may not be your best friend. You may not think it's the greatest person in the world, but you must do this. You absolutely must. And not, all these people on the right, purity spiraling about Putin or other people, you really just must, at least for a while, ally with somebody out of necessity because you have a worse enemy, an enemy that's going to exterminate you.
Here's my perspective. You don't have to choose one. The way that the world is trending is that there won't be one superpower anymore. That whole experience with the United States being the sole superpower for like 30 years, that's a historical aberration. And I don't think that in the future there's going to be like a Chinese world order or a Russian world order. It's just going to be a lot of countries that are pretty large with big economies and militaries. But you know who's going to be the real superpowers of tomorrow? It's going to be the small, middling countries that will be able to be strategically able to play off all these powers. So, like Saudi Arabia, look at how Saudi Arabia is able to get crazy concessions from the U.S. And it's only because the Chinese and the Russians have their own offers. So that ups the ante. So countries like Hungary, look at how Viktor Orban has been able to weather European Union sanctions just by creating greater economic ties with Russia and China. So this is actually, I think, going to be an era of more sovereignty, more freedom for countries to find their own paths.
So we have our bright prediction of the future right here. Excellent. So it finally blossomed out of the conversation. This is what I was hoping for. In the smaller nations. And it does make sense. You're right. It does make sense that through the conflict, the smaller nations that are smart, have smart leaders, would come out on top and then grow, I guess. Is it? They would.
Yeah, I think the smaller countries are going to be even wealthier than probably some of the big ones like Canada and places like that. You're going to go to Hungary and the living standards will be much higher than in Canada in the near future.
Canada has enormous potential from its resources and the breadth of its domain. But it's like obviously very badly mismanaged and low population. Almost all the population lives near the American border in the south. It has potential in a long-term thing, but like in terms of its culture today, it's very very limited. It's like it's sort of just it's very American, but continually trying to prove it's not American.
Oh yeah,
it's espousing further liberalism.
Canadians visit Cuba instead of like, and that's purely because Americans can't.
The Canadians they love going to Cuba. Yeah, they think it's great. Yeah, they're like, we'll show those Americans. But so much of the identity of Canadians is like, oh yeah, we're trying to prove they're not Americans when they're almost indistinguishable. But in terms of the landmass and the potential and resources, etc., I mean, there is a lot of potential there. It's the second biggest country after Russia.
Right.
But what can be done with it in its present state? It's so nothing. It's like a nothing place, It's stripped its own culture. It was so influenced by America, and proceeded through the 20th century into the 21st in this fashion, and like so divorced from a deep connection to any tradition or anything. I don't know what I can't even imagine. But in terms of the actual material potential of the place, it's vast if it was in the right hands.
What do you think of French Canada? Because they seem to be more connected to Europe than Anglo Canadians. I've been to Montreal. I visited Montreal. I actually liked it. It was kind of like this sleazy Bukowski city, but it's got such charm. It's like sexy.
The French are like that. They like a bit of that. In general. French Canadians or French. Anything. Yeah, it is good. I love the French lifestyle. Fucking every time I go to France, I'm just come back thinking I want to live like that. I can't live there, but I think okay, we're just going to start eating fucking baguettes and everyone there is.
French Canadian food is like roadkill. A lot of it is like.
Is it? Yeah, I don't know. I've actually not been. I didn't spend a lot of time there. I don't know that much about it. I drove through it a few times, so I'm not sure what I can say about it. I mean, in terms of the Canadian identity overall, like Jesus, I'm not even sure how to explain it.
Well, the flag is awful. Like that Photoshop, like it looks like MS Paint. The stupid leaf. The old ensign.
Oh, it's like a corporate logo that was invented. Previously, it was obviously the British flag and the Welsh flag and the Irish flag and
that was way cooler. That flag. Way cooler.
Yeah, you would still see that in the odd window when I was a kid around the place. But yeah, fucking Trudeau Senior I think it was during him. Am I wrong? I don't know. Around that time, they changed it to the corporate logo, the leaf. Yes.
The worst flag on the planet, in my opinion. It's up there.
It is. It's so weak and nothing.
It's stupid and hideous.
Yeah.
Whoever developed that is tasteless and obviously doesn't care about Canada. Whoever created that flag, because
Canada is truly a modern nation. Let's say, I don't know. I really should think about this and like write something about it, or it's very hard to describe because there is a culture there, or there was. I don't know anymore. I mean, it's hard. I've been gone for so long. I don't know. It was a great place to grow up. I don't regret it. In some ways, I wish I could go back there because the nature. British Columbia is where I grew up, and in the Rockies. Yes, and you were very in tune with nature. There was bears in our backyard and stuff like that. Like,
That's really cool.
It was cool. It was great.
What about Ireland? So here's something I think about Ireland.
Remember when I met you here? That was hilarious. Remember my buddy?
Oh, yes.
My buddy who was like a fan of your podcast happened to be I won't say give the details, but he happened to find himself sitting next to you.
Yes.
And he recognized your voice because you kept yelling.
Yes. That's a story for another day. But yes, that was great. That was a great experience. That was I loved that. That was one of the best.
That was so hilarious. Of all the like, what are the chances of that, for fuck's sake? I don't know.
Yes, I loved Ireland. You know,
it is great.
During that trip, I was going around Europe, and I went previously to Barcelona, Spain. That's where my grandfather was from that area, not from the city, but he was from that area.
Really? I thought you were like Portuguese or something. I know you're like a man.
My grandmother was Portuguese. My grandfather was from sort of the Pyrenees area between France and Catalan. Right. So I went there, and honest to God, I hated Barcelona. It was
why? I liked it. I was there. I liked it.
It was soulless. It was soulless. It was full of leftists. It's kind of, I didn't like it personally. I felt kind of disappointed, to be honest. And then I went to Ireland, and I loved it. I loved every second I was in Ireland. I love. Okay, the weather's not great, but the lifestyle and the people are really friendly and they're funny. That's something that I really appreciate is funny people. And Irish dudes are funny. They love to bust balls. They always got like a witty line. And so I really enjoyed Ireland. And in the geopolitical context, when I went to Ireland, I think I told you this too. I'm like, I was walking around and saying, a group of nationalists could take this country. Like a group of well-organized nationalists could take this country tomorrow. Because you're not in the Five Eyes. You have already kind of a recent nationalist history. Padraig Pearse, Connolly. You have the nationalists and the socialists. You have a 20th century origin. It's not like trying to figure out what George Washington would say today. What the founders of Ireland would say today because they lived not that long ago. So you have everything going for you in Ireland. And I sense, and you tell me because you live there, Brendan, I sense that there is an awakening in Irish people against liberalism and broadly against what we could call Americanism. Do you think that my view here is correct?
Well, you're thinking obviously of the riots against the immigrants, etc. Yeah, is that right? The when they burning the buses
not just that, but also in conjunction with the rejection of the referendum, where they're going to change the Constitution, to something more gender neutral. Just little things like that. You're never going to see the big explosion. You just got to look at the little things to come up with your own conclusion.
Well, I would say that the Irish, because of the history, are one of the most truly democratic places, and they value the opinion of the people. And those opinions are in a state, like I said about the Palestine murals in the north, etc. They're in a fixed state, and have been for a long time. How can I put this now? Let me think now. Difficult question, because it's true. Like the middle class and upper middle class Irish would still be signaling they would feel that they missed out on decades of where other Western countries were more progressive. Ireland never got divorced until 1997, etc. There's certain the
The birth rate was higher than the rest of Europe.
the bourgeois softies would still feel some kind of shame, and like they're catching up to progressivism and the even though it's waspy, the American kind of idea of the world. And so there's that. And so generally when you see the unrest and so forth, it's from, let's say, the lower classes.
Mhm.
And there's quite a disparity there. So it's not quite as people think, where like Ireland is generally, it's very difficult to explain, because they are generally more, they do have a great national identity that they really do hold on to, all of them broadly, and are very proud of. And they would have always been fairly skeptical of Americans and Americanism. And even when like the Americans would come over, like the mockery, even me, like I'd be like,
they probably think you're American.
well, there's always some American come over like, oh, my uncle was from Ireland, and they're just,
yeah, that's very common.
You know, they always fucking mock.
they're wearing the shirt that with the skull on it. It's like, I'm Irish, kiss my ass, like that kind of thing. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
But
very
then
common.
again,
Yeah.
there's two sides of that. So at the upper levels, there's people that still want to catch up to that and think it's great. But there is, you're right, there is, in terms of potential of like a nationalist uprising, maybe. I mean, that's been tried, and they're still trying and sort of grouping it, but it's still, the old ties are there. The old allegiances to, say, Sinn Féin, etc., even though Sinn Féin has got some major problems, although they've been kind of maybe smartening up recently a little bit in regards to immigration and stuff. From what I've heard, they've been observing what's been going on, and like there is a lot of unhappiness about that.
One thing I'll tell you though about Sinn Féin is, I know they have shitty ideas, but when you read about American policy analysts talking about Ireland, there's a deep fear of Sinn Féin coming to power there. I don't know what it's motivated by, because they seem just like a generic European social democrat party.
But it could be the anti-Israel stuff, or is it? Could it be that?
It could very well be that, but I get this sense of panic. I think when Sinn Féin did really well in the last election, there was a kind of panic in the media coverage of it that was pretty random seeming, because
there's a panic amongst the Irish bourgeois too. I would say they feel a panic about that. But see, this is what I mean. It's not completely like, when I hear Americans seeing it and commenting on it, it's not exactly as they say, but definitely it is a brighter situation than most of Europe, and certainly America. You definitely could say that. And but if Sinn Féin did smarten up, it could be something real, that's for sure. More so than a small group. I really couldn't see, you say it's a ripe situation for a small group to, I mean, maybe, you never know. But again, that would require, again, a disaster situation where they, someone, I think, or something like that. In terms of the way it is now, then Sinn Féin is probably the brightest hope. I don't know if they change their policy.
The main advantage I see for Ireland is, again, they're not in the Five Eyes. That's essentially the Zionist spying and surveillance network. And anyone who lives in an English-speaking country has their information stolen from their phones and piped into this creepy compound in Utah. That the NSA,
I'm sure we probably do. I'm sure we probably do. Like even here, because like even if it's not official government-wise, there is a lot of Ireland is the hub of American Silicon Valley. Basically, there's Google and Facebook and all that. They have huge towers. You go downtown here by the docks. There's like 3 towers in a row. I think it's Google, and there's not like Facebook. They're all here. This is their center from base. They go from America to here, and they broadcast over Europe basically. So
sure,
corporate and commercially wise, they're a big power here. A lot of people are employed.
Oh, absolutely. Oh no, absolutely. But at least, no, I'm not saying it's perfect at all. You make a great point. But at least, I think there's still a taboo between the Irish government cooperating with MI6, right? Or MI5.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, that's one thing you can say, yes. Anything to do with England or Protestants.
Right.
They are still fucking mad as hell, and they hate it.
Well, but here's the thing, a lot of the worst stuff in the intelligence world is coming from England, like globally.
Oh, I know.
mean, we could talk about things like the creation of certain groups in Ukraine. There's a lot of talk about their relationship to ISIS. There's a widespread belief that a lot of the shenanigans where Iranian scientists get assassinated, that they have American CIA doing a lot of this work, but the really nefarious and sinister stuff is coming from like MI6. It's like that's something I've been reading about, and so my point is that Ireland is in a good position geopolitically because it's not in NATO. It's not in the Five Eyes. It could tomorrow, if Ireland tomorrow wanted to get closer to China and Russia, I mean, they would love to do that. No, it's not even out of the realm of possibilities, because the Russians want to be in Ireland because it's right there. They want something to counter the British. Ireland has historically been one of the more sovereign nations. Remember, Ireland didn't participate in World War II, despite the pressure, specifically because of its geographic location and history of non-alignment. So this is why I think I have great hope for Ireland in the long term.
There is hope, but the elites would not agree. And it depends on how much control they can. They don't seem to be very good at managing and keeping control. And they never were in this place. And
weren't the British elites there once?
In terms of you saying suddenly Ireland going over to Russia or something, it sounds far-fetched to me at this point. That's for sure. But in terms of trying to be neutral and impartial and not getting too involved in anything in particular, I could see that, which is, how they were in World War II. Actually, recently was up there's a graveyard near here. It's a beautiful Art Nouveau graveyard for German soldiers that were killed during the World Wars I and II. During the neutrality, and they gave them there's this. I believe they get money from Germany to maintain it. Gorgeous. I'll send you the photos. Art Nouveau graveyard from the era, and just like iron crosses everywhere, and like buried with full honors, and it's maintained nicely, like beautiful to this day. It's up in the mountains, beautiful spot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. But here's another thing for Irish nationalists, like, America's relationship. I personally, I understand trust me, no one is more critical of the British than I am. But you have to also have some sympathy and pity for them, because they've become a vassal of the United States. There's a great new book about this. It's literally called Vassal State. And it's about how American finance and American military and all this essentially has turned England into a colony of the United States. And so one thing that I was thinking about is, if tomorrow Ireland threatened to become an ally of Russia and China and leave the Atlanticist world in that sense, America would instantly go to England and say, "You got to give them Northern Ireland. We're just taking this and giving it to them." I can see that.
Very probably. It's the people, though. Northern Ireland considers itself its own place.
Right.
It doesn't consider itself Ireland or England. And if you gave it to Ireland, like most people in the south would not just want it. I mean, maybe they would. Some would, but like,
doesn't Sinn Féin want it?
Well, maybe they do, but it wouldn't be so easy. It wouldn't be just like we're taking. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe it could be done. Oh, I don't know. It's like a totally different people. You go up there, it's like people who are not English or Irish. It's like something else. It is how I would describe it. And the attitude generally today from Irish people I know in the South, is that we don't want it. It can be its own thing. We don't care. Kind of. It's not like it was. It's not like we, battling over it. But maybe, I don't know.
One last thing I'll say about that too, because I know you probably have a lot of Irish listeners, is I agree with you on many, many of these things, including some of your positions on England and so on. But also look into the history of where British and Irish animosity began, which is Lord Cromwell. I would highly recommend people look up the role that Sephardic financiers had behind the rise of Cromwell.
Yeah.
and how these Sephardic financiers saw Irish Catholics as an extension of Spain, and then thus saw them as a fifth column in the British Isles, and for that reason tried to exterminate Irish people.
Yeah.
There's a compelling argument to be made. I've researched this. Then there's the other incident, Billy Boy, William of Orange. Now that guy was entirely financed by Dutch, that ethno-religious group from Holland, Amsterdam, financiers, international, they were also Sephards.
Yep.
They not just financed Oliver Cromwell, they made all of the decisions once he got into Britain. And then I would also point you to the first British man to become prime minister based off of a campaign of anti-Irish demagoguery. His name was Benjamin Disraeli.
Like the Cream album, Disraeli Gears.
There you go. So I would say, behind the Protestants, yes, they allowed themselves to be used, but maybe scratch to see who's holding the strings in some of these cases. Behind a Cromwell or a William of Orange, or, well, in Disraeli's case,
well, certainly those characters.
Protestant.
Those characters are not well considered here. I can tell you that. Even amongst, like, I have a friend who's a lord. Would you believe? And he has a relative who's a saint, but they're Catholic, and he at one point was kicked out of his castle. His family during Cromwell came through and swept through and kicked him out of their castle, and some other guy, he put some Protestant guy in his place. And to this day, you can go up to his castle, and he'll show you this painting of this guy who ruled there for, I don't know what it was, I don't know how many years, but he left behind this painting of himself sneering about how much he hated the place, and he keeps it in his castle. Like, this was the time of Cromwell. So even amongst those guys, there's like everybody here hates fucking Cromwell. That's for sure.
I would make the argument that Cromwell was also an enemy of the English, of the ordinary English. I mean, look at how he persecuted. The reason why the British, after a Renaissance, the English Renaissance, ended when Cromwell took power. This cultural growth, this cultural flourishing of England, where the stage, the British literature, Shakespeare and so on, flourished, and it all came to an end when Cromwell took power, persecuted the stage, took the organs. All the reason why Britain never had as many classical composers is arguably thanks to Cromwell.
He outlawed fucking Christmas, didn't he?
Yes, he outlawed Christmas. Yeah. Now, who would do that?
Oh, shit, like that. And like, no, he's definitely not well considered here in the slightest. Don't worry about that. But I mean, even oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say. It vanished out of my brain. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But notice, yes. Remember the old rule. They're good at taking power, bad at managing. And Cromwell is an excellent example of that.
Yeah.
Didn't last one generation. His son takes power, he's immediately taken out. And all the Puritans.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to compare Cromwell. He was basically the neocon of his day. And would you dare to compare him to Trump? Or
no, because at least Trump says things people like. Everyone hated Cromwell's. Remember,
okay, that's true. Yeah,
Cromwell was appointed. Cromwell was appointed by the Parliament to defend it from the king. Right. Once he killed the king, he dissolved the Parliament. So
the English seem to like him. If I meet English people, they will speak positively about him. I know that.
Is that true?
Often, yeah. Maybe it's anecdotal and just coincidental, but in my experience, that has been the case. Yes, that he sort of organized the land in such a way that modernized England or something would be the attitude.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
He was pretty shitty, even for the English. The only thing he did for the English was create the Commonwealth. He was basically took the British Empire to a new level. And he did this through connections through, a certain ethno-religious community that controlled the Caribbean and other places, the sugar trade and so on. So I guess
there's one thing you often talk about that I don't fully agree with is that your hatred for monarchy. And that,
well,
I know that, like, I understand that they were traitorous and weak and stupid around the period of World War II, and they are to this day. But you even said, I recently heard you say something like, believing in monarchy is like believing in fucking Lord of the Rings or something like that. Like, that's not fair. Well, considering that there's monarchies around to this day, Saudi and fucking Bhutan and shit, right? So it's not so fantastic. And
but
I
does
know
that support your position or oppose your position?
Well, Bhutan looks like a nice place. I don't know about Saudi.
Have you seen the King of Jordan, Abdullah?
He's like a little guy, right?
Yes.
Jordan. I wanted to ask about Jordan. Yeah, shit. What do you think's gonna happen with Jordan?
Oh, I think that's the weak man in the Middle East. That government is not going to last long if it continues on its path. The people hate the king.
It's not like a government where you vote him out, right? It's got to be like a
the people hate their king. Remember, 50% of people in Jordan are Palestinian. That guy's days are numbered.
Oh, you figure? So that's just total foolishness. Like, he's just, what's he thinking?
He's, the British king, the Jordanian king is the son of an English woman. He's not even, yeah. And he's a bug man. So he used his royal connections to get a cameo in Star Trek. So, if you're going to make an argument for monarchy.
Well, shit. No, just in general, sort of like, just in that I think all roads lead to hierarchy, right? And naked hierarchy is the most best in total reversal of democracy, where everything's controlled by these hidden money power agents. To have the naked leader who's like, you may as well call him a king. Like, even when fucking Stalin takes control and he leads fucking the Soviets, like the most all-powerful pharaoh that ever lived. He's controlling people's minds. He controls reality and history and memory, more than any. And the Workers' Party leader, all they did is change the fucking name of, they've pronounced the king. I just feel there's great honesty in naked hierarchy.
That's a fair point, but you see, my model would be something similar. I am a Republican with a small r. In that sense,
Roman Republican.
Well, Plato's Republic.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
That's my model. And what's interesting? The Iranians have basically applied Plato's Republic to their political system. They have a Guardians Council, which Plato calls for, and they have a parliament with a prime minister or president that's elected, but the Guardians Council gets to oversee it. That's
so excellent. That's so excellent.
That's what I would. That's actually an Aryan or a Hellenic. It's the only actual Greek system left in the world is in Iran. They have the Ayatollah Khomeini modeled it off, not the Quran, Plato's Republic. So I
did
like
he really?
that.
And did he say this publicly? Is this your like interpretation, or he said this?
No. It was a deliberate thing.
That's amazing. That is excellent.
No, read up on it. It's very fascinating. It's entirely modeled off. Now, they have Islamic influence, obviously. It's an Islamic republic. But the structure is the Guardians Council. Except the Guardians the philosopher kings are clergymen, Shia clergymen. But the idea is still there. And that's a system I could agree with.
Would you consider yourself a Platonist in any other sense? No?
I'm not a huge philosophy guy.
Why is that? You're so astute in all these. You just like hard facts, history, like politics.
If you could say historicism as a philosophy, I'm a Spenglerian to a large extent, but when you get into like the meaning of life and so on, I have some ideas, but I can't speak.
Spenglerian is a perennialist, which is as ancient philosophically as it gets, really.
Right.
Right. So you've tapped into that at least.
Oh, of course. Yeah, are you like Evola and such, right?
I like Evola. Yeah, I love Evola. What do you think?
Yeah,
Are you? What do you think of him? I guess because
I
you speak out
haven't
against
read
monarchy quite often, so I wonder.
I haven't read Evola in a good 20 years. No, not 20, 15 years. I haven't read any Evola, so I'd have to brush up on it. But I find some of that stuff to be quite interesting. But the esoteric side of things, I what I'm trying to do is
You
shock
tune out if it gets you basically tune out if it gets sort of spiritual and religious. Is that it?
huh?
You said that you sort of tune out if it gets spiritual and religious. You sort of
I sort of do. And
yeah.
no, and it's not because I
That's
don't
fair. That's fair.
have my own spiritual beliefs. I do.
Oh, do you?
I believe in the Delphic maxims. If you know what that is, those are that would be my code of life, the Delphic maxims. But the thing is, I can't speak to you authoritatively about these things because I'm
Well, nobody
frankly
can.
not.
Nobody can.
Huh?
Well, nobody can. Religiously, it's always just personal.
Right.
And, yeah.
That's what. And as someone like me, I want to uncover truth. And when it comes to things, particularly, I don't know what your religious beliefs are, but when I see people like arguing Christian theology, for example, my eyes
Mhm.
do glaze over because
Mm.
there's no way to win that argument. Like
Yeah.
it's not like
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
ever win. It's never going to be like, oh, okay, that is true. It's just going to be. So I find that to be intellectually hard to justify for myself, to some degree.
No, that's absolutely true, and it's a two-sided sword because the religious question is absolutely fundamental at the same time,
Sure.
and it's right.
Oh no,
Even
I
no,
agree. I'm not an atheist. Some people
no,
think I
I
am.
know, but even in terms of people's values and morality, like even Ireland is today because of its religious conviction, let's say, and as most places are otherwise, and it's a kind of a crucial thing, even if you. And I know you cannot adopt a religion for political reasons. Maybe you can. Perhaps you can, actually.
I think most people probably in history.
Probably
We
they
did,
do. Probably maybe
particularly the popes. I mean, oh man, yeah,
but it's an invaluable element, and in fact, like it also aids in crusading a political movement. I believe, like, say, I've said this. I was saying this recently, but Alex Jones and so forth. Part of the key of his success is that in between his rants, he carries on in between his otherwise no, I won't say rational rants, but his speaking about politics, he infuses it with rants about demons and spiritual stuff. That's really the key to capturing the imagination of people.
mm.
Like I was watching all of these shows about cults recently. There's a lot of cult shows you can find on Netflix, as much as Netflix is to be despised and hated. And again, I'm repeating myself here, but like that was really, if you all you have to do is infuse a spiritual element into your otherwise political movement or ranting, and that will really capture their minds. As a purely expedient.
It depends because you
Tool.
could also turn off some intelligent people when you're ranting about demons. Is there because some people might be like, "Wow, this is enthralling."
Well, I don't.
Other
I'm not
people might
suggesting
be like,
rant
"This
about
is
demons. I'm not suggesting
schizophrenic."
rant. I'm not suggesting he's a rant about demons. It's just that. I don't know. It helps, I guess. But here I have. I'm going to run out and take a piss. If you can
Yeah.
talk about something. Talk about something in 1 minute. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'll talk about some stuff. Yeah. So anyone out there that hasn't seen the thing with the flag going around, some students on campus were protesting for Israel, and they were raising the American flag. And this picture has gone everywhere. Well, I uncovered evidence that the leader of that is a Republican Party operative named Estrada, and he was the organizer, and he specializes in marketing and advertisement. And so my theory is that this man is staged that photo op. Another person that was involved in that photo op is a man named Brendan Rosenblum, and he literally works for the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So anyone who is a conservative supporting this stuff, you're supporting, like, quite literally, like the Zionist version of Antifa when you do that.
What were we talking about? It sounds fascinating.
Oh, I was talking about the this is a very American thing. Is there's a picture going around of college students protesting in favor of Israel, raising the American flag.
Oh,
and this has become a big story here. They're distracting from the mass graves in Israel.
is this where the guy's wearing the jumpsuit with the American flag on it, or whatever? Is that not? Or is that
no? That's a different one, but that's another story. But that's related. It was inspired by this.
Right.
And so I uncovered evidence that this was a photo op. It was staged by a guy who works for the Republican Party as a marketing and publicity guy. He was the one that organized that counter demonstration. And one of the other organizers was Brendan Rosenblum, who works for the Simon Wiesenthal Center since 2022. Right. These are not necessarily patriotic Americans. They're patriotic, all right, but not Americans.
Right.
They're trying to manipulate conservatives into coming out and fighting for Israel again. And
yes,
so that's why I felt it was very important to.
I saw that it was like a last ditch attempt I see on Twitter, like to reclaim that ground and get all patriotic. I saw a bit of that. All right.
Yeah, yes.
It feels fake. It feels fake.
They're trying to get young white Americans to fight for Israel, but only 8%. This is a survey that came out. 8% of white Americans 18 to 29 have any sympathy for Israel whatsoever.
Geez,
28%.
That's even lower than I thought. I thought it would be like 25 or something. Even. That's even lower than I thought.
Maybe if you take all Americans, it might be 30%, but that's old people really balance that out in that direction.
Fucking old people.
Yeah.
They know anything.
Americans hate Israel or don't care. So they're having they're having a hard time. These are the soldiers that you need, and they're not joining up. They don't care about Israel. They hardly even care about American flags. So,
yeah. I have one super chat so far. Let's see. I know nothing from Enlightened Despot. Thank you very much. I know nothing, but I'm right. Well, that's very Platonic of you. Yes.
Very
very Platonic. Extremely Platonic.
Oh, I wonder. I'm more. So you're what are you? You believe in the old gods? You believe in?
Well, I kind of do, to be honest. Yeah. At this point, I was raised Catholic, Irish Catholic myself. Right. The reason I'm here is that I had my mother was born here, so I could get a passport.
Oh, nice.
And I came here on a working holiday and met my wife and got married and never went home.
There you go.
But how can I explain it? So I was raised Catholic, and that's always with me, and I'm always I'm sure I will be buried as a Catholic. But yes, in terms of it's kind of it feels like personal and strange, but yes, I do. Ever since learning historically about studying religion and philosophy and seeing like last night's stream, I was talking to this guy Arval, and it was all about this Platonism and paganism and Christianity, and it's a long and difficult topic. But realistically, I do have a belief in I believe the sacred mystery is occurring all around us. I believe that the fact that reality is occurring is evidence of a miracle. Obviously, if nothingness was the basic principle of, it would be so easy for things to not exist. Doesn't it seem that way? And the fact that existence is occurring and is obviously tangible is evidence of some kind of energy, some kind of force, and it's probably utterly inexplicable to us. But
I agree with that.
I agree with that. Yeah. you should probably show it some reverence of some sort, and whatever way you want to interpret it, considering our beliefs and what we've learned, we might as well reach back as far as we can, which, there's a link from certainly the pagan beliefs right back to the original Indo-European Deus, who is, as you know, Deus Pater, Jupiter, Zeus.
Right.
And even to this day, Sky Father, our Father in heaven, you might say, right? So
Yes.
there's a link to all these things, to showing a reverence for this, whatever.
Yes, I find that, I have a very similar set of beliefs as you do, in that I have a respect for the Catholic Church as a historical institution. And Catholicism, I find, is what I like about Catholicism is the emphasis on hierarchy, the way it's been, that it's comprehensive, right?
Yep.
Like you don't just, like, if your daughter gets knocked up out of wedlock in a Catholic society, you don't just write her off and send her to go be homeless and die somewhere. You figure out some solution like that. That makes for a more humane society. However, societies like that also are not very conducive to a modern capitalist society. Right now, Protestantism is the reverse of that. But ultimately, yes, I have a pretty low opinion of Protestantism as a religion.
That's true, but you must admit, say, for instance, the greatest empire since Rome was obviously the British Empire. We're sitting here speaking English.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? They were very obviously Protestants, and there was a certain high culture to Protestantism for a while. You must admit, right?
Well,
the founding fathers of America, etc., as well.
Well, founding fathers were not religious. They were pretty. Benjamin Franklin saw Christianity as in Machiavellian terms.
But there was there's a culture of Protestantism. Let me say this. Like, you may not be aware of this. It's something I learned since I was here. That, say, in Ireland, if you go to a wedding between a Catholic person and a Protestant person, the Protestants will all arrive on time and be ready and waiting to go, and the Catholics will all sort of haphazardly come in, chatting with each other whenever they feel like. And there's a difference. There is a cultural difference between
that's because even if you're not Southern European, say you're Irish or Polish, Catholicism is like Southern European soft power. So you're going to be late and lazy. It's going to be.
Yeah, I don't know what lazy, but it's sort of like looser, or But there's also there. I'm not Protestant, so I can say this objectively. There is a kind of, and there was an excellence, say, to the British Empire, despite the fact I'm Irish and speaking in Ireland, and related to the fastidiousness and the timeliness of that Protestant ethic of doing things precisely. You know what I mean? And that was that's very much a historically British thing that doesn't exist anymore. Sort of high culture.
I'm of the opinion that the British were greater before their empire.
Probably.
I'm talking about the English Renaissance.
But that leads to the empire. When someone is so great and they have such a high art, they must expand. I feel like this is where I am actually pro-empire in a lot of ways. I believe it's inevitable.
The problem, however, is that your creative forces are basically not hijacked, but have to be allocated towards the sort of economistic management of empire. So you'll notice that countries oftentimes, the countries like Ireland, for example, are known as like literary superpowers, right? Like they created some of the greatest authors in history.
A lot of them were Protestants, to be honest. Like if you think of Yeats and
right. No, it's not a Catholic or Protestant thing at all. But I have my own view on this is that when a nation's creative forces have to be concentrated, that is more conducive to cultural creation because of the leisure time that allows. If you have a globe-spanning empire, You don't have as much time for culture. You have to become more efficient. You have to become more economically sophisticated, militarily sophisticated, and so on. And so your creative forces are sucked into that. I would say Germany is another example. The 19th century Germans were probably the best era of European culture since Greek times. I would argue the philosophy that came out of Germany at the time. And I find that this is related, at least not as a causative sense, but a correlation, that the Germans had no choice but to concentrate their racial force and bring it inwards internally. Perhaps if the Germans had had a great global empire, we would have never had a Beethoven or a Bach or anything of that sort. You know,
I don't agree. I think they would have just expanded that, to be honest. And I was in Germany recently for the first time, and let me tell you, I was incredibly impressed with it. Incredibly. And
even now, eh?
Yes. For the first time, I was there just a couple months ago, and like, first of all, there was I went to a Gothic cathedral. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and it wasn't just that. It was like, also, the produce in the store and the shops was totally pre-inflation prices. I don't know what that's all about. I never heard about that or why.
I remember that too when I was in Germany. But continue.
Okay, right, okay. So it's still like that. It was totally normal prices for like food and stuff. I was like, what? No one told me this would be the case. I was totally amazed by that. But also, generally, I could see a difference in their attitudes of the world and see exactly what comprises them, and that it still exists. I was like, just so pleased to see the difference in them, that they're still just a unique type of people. And I did want to say regarding Protestantism. Sorry, I'm getting a bit drunk now, but
it's all right.
I've been drinking the whole time. That I don't want to.
Damn, I gotta catch up.
I don't want to stand in defense of it, because I would stand in defense of. I do have a certain admiration for the British Empire and what it achieved. I do have a certain, as a Canadian, I guess, or just what I've read of it as the greatest. I always have an admiration for empire and when it can do what it does. But overall, modern day Protestantism is certainly a very negative force, and a lot of what we spoke of earlier in the decadence of Americans, the sexual decadence, I attribute to that somewhat. And even like American Catholics seem to me very Protestant. Like Irish Catholics are very pagan, and Italian Catholics, and European Catholics.
European Catholics
really are very pagan. It's all about the ritual, and as a cultural observance.
French Catholics.
Probably, I'm sure. Yeah. The French are like this is what is great about Europe. You go to any of these countries, and the people are totally different. But it's not all this ranting about Jesus and thumping the Bible shit. Like, even you see like people, famous Catholics on Twitter, they seem, if they're American, they seem very Protestant to me.
And oftentimes they are. They're converts.
Well, yeah, probably. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
like you can't join the Catholic Church, and then the second you're in the Catholic Church, go, oh, I don't believe in the Pope anymore. Let's form our own church. No, that's not, you can't do that. That's Protestantism.
You know what it is. You know what it is in a reality, as far as I can see in Europe, it's being like sort of modest about your sexuality. Like you can be as fucking, you can do what I do, enjoy the odd nude photograph or whatever. But you're like,
what's wrong with female nudity?
You don't in casual conversations start talking about your sexual practices or your periods or something, or you just don't do that. You wouldn't start casually talking about sex in the same way as I see Americans doing. This is one of the major differences, and I don't know the implications of that, but that's one big difference.
I think the problem with Protestantism from a social perspective is that it's zero sum. You either have a really extreme puritanical worldview, or you have no worldview, no limits. and there's nothing in between. The Catholic Church, because it's older and has had to fight off more challengers, has over the years. I think personally, no offense to any Catholics out there, the Catholic Church is a lost cause now. But from a historic perspective, the Catholic Church has had to reform itself in ways that aren't bad, like be more realistic, be more emphasizing the human side of things. The Reformation is a great example. Revelo P. Oliver was a devout atheist, if you can be a devout atheist, and even he was a supporter of the Catholic faction during the Reformation, largely because he saw the Protestant element as a Judaizing force. So there's that as well. My main issue with Protestantism is not with Protestant people. It's with certain Calvinism, things like this, that I don't know how far I can go talking about this on YouTube, but you catch my drift.
Yeah. For sure it is. Yeah, it absolutely is. Because if they want to observe every word of the Bible, it's going to be extremely Semitic, let's say, obviously, more so than where Catholics are really retaining the tradition of Rome. I've said this before as well. I'll say it to you now: is that if you read the Odes of Horace, there's one ode where it's a poem where he's reciting from the pulpit, basically, he's talking about Jupiter. It's basically what do you call it? Like a sermon in a church or whatever in ancient Rome. And it's so close to a Catholic mass in every way, except he's talking about fucking Jupiter. And, in many ways, Catholicism has a certain link to that.
Original. And that's the Protestant critique of Catholicism.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so you're attacking all the great things about Catholicism. Because,
and getting circumcised in the process.
Here's an interesting history. The Ottoman Turks, again, under this ethno-religious group that's not Muslim, that was Sephardic, right. They were supporters of the Dutch Protestant revolt against Spain. And they managed to convince the Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, that Protestantism was a form of Islam, and that the Islamic theology, again, the banning of idols, the sort of that type of stuff. It actually is very similar. Like the Protestant view of culture is actually very similar to the Muslim one. The problem is we're not Muslims. We're not Middle Easterners. We're Europeans, and we have a sensual, perhaps an accentuated sensual side. And so Protestantism is just unnatural in that context for Europeans. That's my opinion. I know I'll probably spur some haters for saying that, but that's just my worldview on this.
Well, there's also within the confines of any belief or system, within those limits, I believe if you can find ways to be creative, and in fact, you need limits in a certain way to be creative as well. So
that's true.
There's no need to totally shit on the Protestants entirely. And in fact, they did have a great time of it, especially in regards to the British Empire and other empires of earlier epochs. But in their current state, they're pretty bad, it seems like, and very nihilistic. And they're open to this manipulation, this materialism, and this I don't know. And like you've spoken several times about this evangelicalism and its roots in being as a manipulation. And like when I was growing up in Canada, actually, I was raised in this tiny sort of Catholic community in generally speaking, where I grew up. If someone was seriously religious, they were some kind of evangelical. And a lot of my friends, like my one friend, I remember I loaned him my Lord of the Rings books, and his father burned them because they were fucking. He thought they were.
Oh, he thought there was witchcraft. Oh my god!
He thought it was pagan, fucking. It
Jesus.
was the devil or whatever. He burned my Lord of the Rings books. I was like, "Fuck you." But these were a lot of those people were around at that time, and I remember them. I go to sleep over at my friend's house, and his father would always be trying to convince me to come to his church with him and stuff. And then my friend would be telling me, "Actually, you don't want to go. They're crazy. They start fucking talking in tongues, like babbling, blah blah blah." I was like, fuck, like that sounds insane.
I mean, yeah.
People who were religious back then. This is in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm like quite old, right? You know, that in where I grew up, the really religious people, that was their nature. And it was this Protestant evangelical bullshit that you've recently been speaking about was a manipulation. And I don't,
It was
I'm not surprised to hear it. Not
it
surprised to hear it.
it was created by an ethno-religious group I can't name on YouTube.
Well, I'm sure we've mentioned them several times, or don't
here's how it is.
unnecessarily.
I won't go too far, but I'll just say this.
Right.
The real father of what is known as televangelism, which
Yeah.
is how the evangelical, prior to World War II, true evangelical Christianities, particularly these millenarian end of the world ones, were extremely fringe, even within the Protestant world. They were
Right.
really fringe.
Yeah.
They only became the dominant Christian church in America in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And this was after an individual of Jewish ancestry who ran ABC, a TV channel, contracted
I remember ABC.
Billy
ABC,
Graham, contracted Billy Graham to do a weekly show called The Hour of Decision, which was like half variety show, half sermon. And this was piped into the homes of millions of Americans and basically recruited people through repetition. And that's where it began. That's where evangelical, it didn't begin in a church. It began through television, the advent of television.
Was it?
And the people that spread it were, let's just say, not Christian. And they spread it because they really intensified the spread of it because they wanted to have an American anti-communism that was not anti-Semitic. They wanted to have a rallying call, a crusade against global communism without it becoming anti-Semitic, because in the 30s, we know what happened with the anti-communist movements in Europe. So that was the actual goal. The Eisenhower administration and the elites of this ethno-religious group came together and essentially ginned up what we know as evangelical Christianity and spread it all over the world. The CIA helped spread it too.
Even here, they have some churches. Yeah, I've seen them. Although I believe they're mostly populated by Africans.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, something like evangelical Christianity, there's more of them that are non-white now. Like, for example, I read that Guatemala is now mostly evangelical. So,
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So,
it's big in like places like Brazil and that. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I meet the odd Brazilian evangelical. Yeah.
And you can see how it's politicized because the support base for the Jair Bolsonaro, who was one of the most Zionist leaders in the Americas for a while, was that group, evangelicals. So they have the policy, they have the leaders. The leaders have an agenda. It's to be Zionist and philo-Semitic. And then what they do is they create a voting block rather than the other way around, where the people create a leader. No, the leaders create the peoples. They do it through the spread of things, through television and entertainment and so on. They were able to spread this type of theology. Yeah, and honestly, it's a problem because all the men in my generation that came from homes that were evangelical, they volunteered to go to the military and they got killed or injured because of it.
Oh, really?
In the war on terror. Yes, the Iraq and Afghanistan war.
Well, all I can say is I can only speak on behalf of my buddies in Canada, and like most of them their parents were involved in it, they really rebelled against it, and it's like their parents sincerely believed it. And I remember like the same friend whose dad burned his books, he would tell him like he's going to be, when he began leaving the church, his parents would tell him you're going to wind up in hell, demons pecking out your eyes, fucking crazy shit like this,
Hey, that sounds like Dante.
He was like Dante.
Hey, where's that in the Bible? Where's that? See,
Dante. What?
Right. Go on, man. This is my critique of Protestantism, is that even their reference points come from what they call pagans. Dante was a Catholic, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That whole thing about going to hell and burning in hell and people.
Well, his description of hells were quite elaborate and amazing. I remember actually, I do love the Inferno. I've read it just as a bit of poetry, and like the I believe there's I remember the level, the most striking level of hell was the one where you go around on a track, and at some point in this track, you're walking perpetually in a circle. A demon comes out and cuts you in half, but then you're reconstituted, and then you continue to walk the track, but you forget where you are or why you're there, and then all of a sudden he jumps out and does it again.
Yes.
And you have the moment of realization every time. Oh, I'm in hell. It's like fucking the most torturous, awful.
But you know, I love, you know, we sometimes sometimes people have moralistic critiques of violence and sex and so on, but you see it all in Dante. I mean, you see it all in the Inferno. It's all there. It's all there. I mean, you can see. I mean, down to the was it Centrum Mundi? Where is that? It's in the Devil's Balls. Like.
Oh, and what's the one
with kind of vulgarity that I kind of like that type, like, you know, vulgarity that has a purpose, not just like, you know, sort of ethno-religious vulgarity that we see with some people, but like the one that has a purpose to really make something visceral, to send a message. You know, that is, I find, very important in literature and poetry.
Yeah, well, it's better written than the Bible. I can tell you that. It's more enjoyable to read than the Bible.
That's my perspective too.
Even though it's very, very Christian religious, but also I enjoy the his whole. I believe also Plato and Socrates and them appear in that, don't they? At one point, but they're in purgatory. They're because they're pagans, they're not quite allowed into heaven, but they're obviously respected. People, and they're sort of. It's funny how that is treated, and Dante just invents all this himself. It's like it's almost like he's written his own Bible in a way. You know, it's description. It's stuck. It's in our tradition. It's in the minds of people, and
it's in everything. In everything.
It is.
You read a comic book, you watch a movie. It's all derivative of that.
Yeah, but he was a genius in that sense. It's just like I find it hard to believe that anyone should suffer in such a way for eternity, frozen in a fucking lake and chewing the head off the person next to you. Crazy shit. It's so horrific. It has to be like a medieval type person who's witnessing witch burnings and stuff to come up with that shit.
Indeed. But, you know, but I got to run soon. I got a few things to do. Well, I just got to do some drinking. So
I've been drinking the whole time. But yeah, we'll shut it down there. I don't know. So what do you think is going to happen? Let's just say, what do you think is going to happen in the Middle East ultimately?
Here's something anticlimactic. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. There's so many balls in the air. There's so much stuff going on. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu could be forced out of power soon. Mm-hmm. That's a strong possibility that he is forced out of power. There's already high-level resignations going on in the Israeli government because the war effort is failing. I think that they're going to have trouble in Rafah. They're going to create a massive, even worse publicity problem for Israel and lose a lot of IDF soldiers. I think that the entire Middle East will become more anti-Israel than ever in history if they're not already there. I'm talking about people, not the governments. And this is going to put pressure on the governments, particularly in places like Jordan, which I think it's a dark horse that it could be overthrown at some point. And on the American front, I think that if they go into one of the reasons that the U.S. government is frightened of going into Rafah is that the summer is coming. They're going to have a convention in Chicago, the Democratic Convention. And there's a history of the anti-war protests where they rioted there. However, in 1968, the mayor of Chicago was a man named Richard Daley, and he crushed the protests, crushed them. This time, the man in charge of Chicago, where they're going to have the convention, is a black guy named Brandon Johnson or something. And let's just say he's not he's not the most astute or intelligent. So we could see something like students that are protesting getting shot. in a situation like that, where they don't know what they're doing. They're just given orders to shut it down. There could be a kill. There could be people dying if there is a massive protest, which is expected at the Democratic Convention, which I think is in August. And if this coincides with Israel doing massacres in Rafah and the U.S. continuing to support it, it could create a domestic crisis in the U.S. It's all on the table. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm just saying these are possibilities. So that's my view on that.
That is a good and fascinating prediction. Excellent. And the best we can hope for. And yes, I mean, it's very immediate and local and soon and precise. So let's see what happens then. That's all we can do. And so thanks for coming on. It was great to talk to you. I got many comments about your hair, which is fucking excellent.
Oh, thank you.
Your coif is beyond even,
I
can only imagine what people who've never seen you, this guy looking like Elvis comes on ranting about Israel. It's like, no one's seen something like this since fucking Danzig, basically.
Oh, man. I appreciate it. My haircut gets, you either love it or you hate it.
I love it. I love it. I love Elvis. I fucking love Elvis. Elvis was, it reminds me of my pal. It reminded me of my buddy, my German buddy. He was a Jehovah's Witness, but he'd always tell me about his granny, his German granny, and in her bedroom she had a poster of Hitler and a poster of Elvis.
Oh, man. Whoa. Sounds like me.
So I'm fucking sabotaging the YouTube now with my stupid talk. So fuck this. I'm gonna go. So
all right, take care,
Jordan, thank you so much. Josephus.
Thank you.
You're a great man.
Thank you. And likewise, Fred. Likewise.
Thank you. And goodbye, everybody. That's it. I'm gonna go. Goodbye.